People who get locked into a vision. All right, that's it, man. That's their drive. That's their passion. Critics don't matter. This don't matter. They're going to do whatever it fucking takes to be the best at what they do.
This is Dave Tate again with another edition of Table Talk. Today I'm here with Nate Harvey, and we're going to be answering your questions, going off on rants, tangents, maybe talk about shit coaches say, and other kind of things from Nate's war wagon. So I guess to start off with, let's go with trying to think of a general topic, because I have a feeling the theme's going to be all conjugate.
Yeah,
that's kind of how it's going to lean. So
maybe we should talk about HIIT real quick.
Yeah, it's like
throw a curveball.
Yeah, throw something in there that's going to like completely be in left field. Yeah, let's talk about high intensity training for a little bit, just to show the scope of what I think a strength coach should know.
All right.
You know what I'm saying? Where you come through and I feel all strength coaches should know basic linear. We'll talk about linear. That's basic. Everybody should know that, because that's kind of, I think that's the roots that everything else kind of gets built upon. Mm. So if they don't understand that, there's no way they're going to understand anything else.
Yeah.
But I think anybody going into coaching should know linear. They should know HIIT training, and they should know basic bodybuilding splits, protocols, methods. They should know linear, which I already said. They should know conjugate. They should know block. So it would take too long to go into, detail with all those things. But they really should. Like I've said in the past, you should be able to look through any popular program that's worth its weight or cost. Because let's put it this way, if you're looking through any popular program and it doesn't fall within some form of periodized style, it's probably a bullshit program.
Right.
Or to throw a big curveball in there, what you're looking at is somebody's training log after the fact, because sometimes that can be auto-adjusted so heavily that when you look back, you're like, what the fuck was that?
Right.
But that's where kind of falling back on Buddy's presentation, where he was saying that he quoted somebody that told him that periodization is bullshit. That it doesn't work. That any structured program doesn't work. So anyhow, I got off target.
Yeah.
Basic linear periodization, guys, is what you're going to find most lifters follow and most coaches follow, which starts with your basic hypertrophy phase, which is, how did you usually cover it up?
Usually 3 by 10 to 12 reps for 4 to 6 weeks, same exercises, and go, like I said, 4 to 6 weeks, and then you switch into your general strength, and you basically...
Well, let's stay with the hypertrophy phase first, because that's the easiest. When I used to run this kind of stuff, that was always the easiest, because every exercise is going to be essentially programmed the same way.
Yeah.
So your main lifts and your accessories and your supplementals are all, 3 to 4 sets, 10 to 12, basic DeLorean type method. But then you move into the next phase, which some would call strength phase.
Yeah.
Which now you're going to drop the reps, which, depending upon the program, everybody changes it. It could be 5s, could be 8s.
Yeah.
It's kind of, it progressively, or doesn't, the intensity progressively increases, which is the percentage, and the load or the volume decreases over a period of time. This is where things get a little tricky.
Yeah.
Because if you start hitting in the strength phase, you start getting down into the 5s. 2 sets, 3 sets of 5. What do you do? Let's say it's a deadlift day, and that's what's programmed for the deadlifts. What do you do for the bent over rows?
Right.
You do the 5s or do you do the 10s? And that was always a big question mark that's left up in the program. Even if you go back to the old school powerlifting USAs, because they would write workout of the month. And
Okay.
here's the deadlift, but they never told you what the accessories were.
Yeah.
Now I found out, just through conversation with Ed Cohn, that he cycled his accessories exactly the same way. So if his deadlift day was deadlifts, maybe stiff leg deadlifts, bent over rows, he kind of stayed in the same, kind of like to stay in the same place, same bar. So deadlifts, put a plate under, a 100-pound plate, stiff legs, you're still there, bent over rows.
Right.
But he cycled those down into triples too.
That's
that's
great. I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah.
That's one of those things, like you're talking about staying with the fives for the whole program. So, like, sometimes you look at a program and you kind of wonder, did they actually do this? Mm-hmm. Like for me personally, if I'm doing bent over rows, sets of 5 for 3 weeks, maybe that's part of the reason Ed. I know if I did that, it'd be done, like trashed.
Yeah.
And I look at the way Joe trains too.
Mm-hmm.
I know if I tried to switch over and do what he does, like, holy shit.
You just can't do accessory. I mean, you got to pull accessories.
Yeah.
I mean, it has to become the main thing. But that's kind of one of the problems with the strength phase. And I use this style of training for 3 of my elite totals. So I kind of know the undulating. I know, every different way to kind of break this program to try to make it work,
right.
In different senses of the term. But the accessories were always a tricky one, where I kind of just based that with the most successful cycles on how I felt.
Yeah.
Because you start getting into your 5s, the first, it's like 8s, and which for me with powerlifting, the even numbers were always fucked up. Like the odd numbers were the cool numbers. So I didn't want to do 8. And
right.
That was bodybuilding shit. I wanted to do 7. You know what I'm saying?
Because that makes you a powerlifter.
Yeah. It's like, and fucking, you just really want to get to the 5s.
Yeah.
Because to me, the 5s were the meat and the potatoes. That's where most of the strength was really built.
Right.
And then the triples, you start getting into a peak phase. And that's when things would start phasing out of the linear program. Exercises would phase out.
Right.
Because you're peaking, and then you kind of go right into the meat. And the advantages of this are, you're putting all the focus into the main lifts that you're going to compete in. It's percentage based, so the intensity is somewhat controlled. I can go into all the negatives, which are all the same as the positives,
right?
But the biggest, I guess, help I can put out there from my side for people that train that way, just straight linear periodization, which some of them will just stay with 5s, and just start really light.
Right.
And then add 10, 15 pounds every single week. The best advice I can give to them is, if you do any nonlinear and the percentage is going up, let's say you're going 65% one week, the next week is 70, then the next week is 75%, then you want to go down because it's undulating. You don't want to go down to the 65 and then go from the 75 to the 80. All right, because that's kind of how you would pick up where you would leave off, right?
Yeah.
But that little dip, which I guess now they would call it deload.
Deload, yeah.
All right, that little dip I found was better to just not do the lift at all and just take the week off, because your mind plays a role in all this. So you end up being used to 60, 65, 70 or whatever, 75%. And then you go back down to 60% feels light as fuck.
Right.
All right. So now you're just screaming up with that. But then you take a 20% jump that next week, because now you're at 80%,
Right.
All right. Or you take the more long-term approach and you step it back up again. But you don't start at the 50% or the 60%, you start at 65.
Right.
All right. Well, now you're getting into 3-week waves.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Which now you're starting to get out of linear. So my advice with people using the linear approach is, and it's become very, very accepted advice nowadays, is underestimate your max. Wendler with 531 says start 10% under.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Power lifters, I used to base it on my max, my competitive max, because I didn't realize till later, fuck, that ain't the same. You know, when you take a month off training and then you're fucking around doing bodybuilding stuff and you start going into a program, that 70% is really like 80.
Yeah.
And what happens is over a period of force, by the time you get to the fives, say you got 3 sets of 5, you're getting 1 or 2 sets. You might get 5 and then it's okay, and then 4 and you're thinking, what the fuck?
Right.
And then a triple, and you're like, oh man, this meat's fucked.
Yes.
And you're all screwed because your percentage was too high to begin with. And it becomes guesswork, you know, the RPE. So you fall back on that, and I tried that. Okay, let's just go with that. And it does, for beginners, it's going to work. Right? Because the other thing it doesn't take in, well, I'm trying to stay away from the positives here, okay? There's a lot of negatives that are associated, but I'm trying to help out the people who are like diehard, you know, linear periodization, just to throw that curveball in there, because right now everybody's like, what the fuck? Why are they not talking about conjugate?
We just lost everybody. Everybody turned it off.
Well, it's there is a question that I saw that was asked out there, which is going to be an interesting one to get to. But most people, I'm sure yourself included, did this.
Yeah.
You know, you went through and you had luck with it. In the beginning, you had a lot of luck with it, but then you started to hit those roadblocks, and then you try to overcome them. So how did you overcome some of your roadblocks with linear?
It's funny, when I switched over was probably about the time I hit like my first big roadblock. It was like junior year. We were going into testing, and I was running the linear stuff, and training was going great. Like I was smashing 5s for weights I had never done before. 3s went well, and then we came into test, and I fell on my face, and I was like, I hurt my lower leg a little bit squatting or whatever, and it was kind of at that point that, for whatever reason, that's at the same time I kind of transitioned over. But to your point of going lighter, if somebody had told me that, I think that's huge.
Yeah.
You know, back your training percentages down a little bit. It was like going into my testing, I don't want to say too strong, too fast, but you run into a wall. And if I had kind of underestimated things, it would have helped. You know, even now with my dynamic work, a lot of people say go 50 to 60% of your competition. I can't do that. You know, so like my best suited squat's 1,000. And if I'm working 500 to 600 pounds on speed day every week, I'm not going to last very long.
Yeah.
Like, that's just the truth of it. So I think that's a huge point. Kind of underestimate things and give yourself time to get strong and be patient. You know what I mean? If there's one piece of really good advice somebody could have told me 7 years ago when I kind of started hitting my stride lifting, would be patient.
Yeah, if you're a power lifter, I think that a really solid understanding of what submaximal is really needs to be defined and like drilled into people's heads. That if you're a beginner and you still have some technical flaws, you know, which even advanced people have technical flaws, but beginners have more, then the submaximal is going to be a little bit harder, because you're going to have to learn how to move heavy weights correctly. Right. So it's going to be a little bit harder. The more advanced you get, the less that really needs to be, you know, to where, you know, and granted we're talking about a gear age, but the principles are still the same. You know, it's just the gear adds a little bit, you know, to the top end, you know, of the end result. But the most I would squat in the gym, I never squatted, I don't believe I ever squatted anything over 825 in the gym. And I would open, that's about what I would open with. But I mean, it was crazy. It's the bench. I mean, the more I was at Westside, the bigger that deficit became between the training max and the competitive max. Right. To where, you know, it's the most I may handle with a max effort exercise might have been 100 pounds off what I was going to do in the meet. Yeah. You know, with no deadlifts. But you have to have the confidence, you know, and, you know, Jim at the high school I hear does a lot of work, which is submaximal weight. So then when he does test the kids, they're 100 pounds stronger than what they thought, but they have to have the confidence, you know, that they're going to be that much stronger than what they thought. Whereas I don't think I think when you tell people, and they're more advanced lifters, like, look, if you want to squat 820, you really may only have to squat 700 or 720 in training.
Right.
To be able to squat the 820, they get all fucked up about it.
Yeah, it's hard advice to take. Like, if you're a younger you and you walk in and see older you, and older you tries to tell you that, you're gonna be like, okay, right.
Yeah, I mean,
whatever.
Minimal, you'd be looking at. Well, I'll use Joe as an example because I think he's going to do really well this weekend, and I have a feeling that his heaviest squat in the gym is probably going to be 60 to 80 pounds under what. Well, let me put it this way. I know it's 60 to 80 pounds under what he's capable of doing.
Right.
Where he could have done, and in the past he might have done one more week of training and hit that one triple. But he doesn't need it.
Yeah.
He needs that during the meet, and that's the advice. Even from a linear standpoint, I think that kind of needs to fall in there as well, is work on your mental strength and a little bit less on your physical strength, and have the confidence. With that. The other thing with linear, though, before we depart from that, is most people fall upon it as beginners, and when beginners, technique changes. Sometimes significant improvement in the output changes. So if they're on this progressive intensity program, and it's based upon a 420 squat, but they finally figure out how to push how to spread the floor, how to get tight, how to keep their upper back tight and their torso braced.
Right.
That could very well put 50 pounds on their squat, but it was 50 pounds that they already had but weren't displaying. All right. So now all of a sudden they run into this, oh shit, all my weights are super easy. Should I adjust the percentage?
Right.
And that's where, having a coach kind of helps.
Yeah.
Because they can see.
Or they might even hang around on that program for too long because of that jump. You know what I mean? The increase you talk about, like you said, is more because of their technique improvement, maybe not so much of the program or whatever they were doing in the gym, but in their mind, I was doing this at this time, and my squat jumped up 80 pounds. I'm never doing anything else.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You run into that too.
The key thing and then we'll leave the linear alone. The key takeaway with that is when it stops helping, and you'll know. It's kind of like people ask me, man, how do I know when I need to get my hip replaced? Like, dude, trust me, you're going to fucking know. And everybody that's ever had theirs done says exactly the same thing. But everybody who's got a little hip injury is like, how am I going to know? It's just ask anybody who's had it done.
Yeah,
you're going to know. Yeah. When the linear stops working for you, don't expect that it's going to work the next time. You have to change something. Either have to drop the percentages, maybe try to combine the squat and deadlift on the same day, maybe take them on, if they're on the same day now, maybe spread them apart. I tried all 3 lifts on Saturday and just one accessory training session in the middle of the week to try to drive it that way, and I had success that way. And you would think the conditioning would be better at the meet, but it wasn't. It was worse, because it was too much rest, in between. But you have to change major variables to be able to get a jump start out of that, because it will work. It's a tricky fucker because most people fall upon it when they're beginners and they put 200-300 pounds on their total or every lift, and they think, man, this is the magic program, and it's like, I got to do this again. But it doesn't work that way. Your body adapts and you got to figure a way around it. And I think that's how most people find their way into block or into conjugate or concurrent or different styles of training, because they've tried, so many other things. What I will also put out there as a caveat is when you get stuck, and I'm only putting this out there for the powerlifters right now, because there's a huge hole in the bucket. We got a lot of powerlifters coming in the sport, but they're coming out at the same rate. Right. So it's not growing. We have a lot of, I call them laser tag lifters. They come in, they do one meet, and they leave. And but there it is. There's a huge hole in the bucket, and it's why it is. There's numerous reasons why it could be there. They could all feel that they can't do a meet unless they have a coach. Then they run out of money. But regardless of all those reasons, if somebody hits a sticking point, the first thing I think you should do is to educate yourself more on training, because most people don't. They just look for a coach for answers or hire a coach, which is fine. I mean, I understand that. But they should still try to figure out why they overcame that, because here's what typically happens. Here's what I think happens now. They hit a sticking point and they quit. They just figure, you know what, this is as strong as I'm going to get. They don't know that much about the sport. They're not educated to know that this is normal. This is right. It doesn't just always linearly come up. It may take you sometimes 3 years to put 5 pounds on a lift.
Right.
But, then it jumps from there. The other variable would be they would go into like single ply or multi-ply gear. So they get stuck. It's like, I'm going to put gear on now, I'm stronger. All right, which I think shortchanges themselves because they're not learning how to overcome a sticking point. The other option is drugs. So they hit the sticking point, they go straight on drugs, and then that overcomes the sticking point. Irregardless of, unless they quit, irregardless of if it's going into single or multiply or if it's going into drugs, at some point down the line, they're going to be stronger. They're still going to run into another sticking point, but they're not going to know what to do. Yeah. They should learn that while they're at their weakest and at the most, I don't want to say most impressionable, but they should do it at the time to when some of the smaller things will help them overcome the weak point. Like a technical change for a beginner can really make a big difference in overcoming a weak point, where a technical change for an advanced person who's stuck, it may or may not help, but you might not know until they get back up to, maximal heavy weights with the actual lift that they're going to compete in. Yeah. So that's the lost. I think if there is a lost art that's kind of been pulled away, it's that people don't want to take the time to try to figure shit out from themselves. And it's a golden age for that, because people will answer your questions on Instagram. Most people, right? We got a whole website full of content. You can find the answer. Right. Fuck, you can find multiple answers. And if you go and search and you find 20 answers, there's going to be commonality amongst those 20 on no matter what you look up. That's going to help you overcome that. Yeah. That's the caveat that I have there. So
I almost feel like you're speaking to me a little bit, kind of when I made the transition. I don't want to say I was a program hopper, but kind of back that, like, we didn't have as much avenues to explore different things at that point. You know what I mean? Like you said, you can go on Instagram and really you can get advice from some of the best people in the world. Like, we didn't have that, so I would kind of go program, like, and instead of, maybe I should have stuck around and figured things out a little more, because now I'm having to do that later, like you said, and it's a lot harder. It's a lot harder. It's a lot harder for me, like, for example, to, finally figure out maybe I shouldn't do max upper and max lower on 2 consecutive days, because the next following day on Tuesday, every week for the past couple months, I feel like I got hit by a truck. Like, I can't even think straight. I'm like, why can't I get any freaking work done today? And then finally, a couple weeks ago, I'm like, well, it's funny. I tell other people not to do that, but just because the schedule of the gym where I'm at, that's what I'm doing. But it's like, so being older and more stubborn, it's definitely harder to change those things and figure them out. If maybe when I was 19, 20, if I would have stuck on, like when I was having issues with the linear stuff, maybe pull an exercise out or kind of tweak things around a little bit. But at the same time, like I said, we didn't have the resources. Like, there was no one in my immediate network to figure that out. So I did what I did, which, luckily I did what I did, but it,
it can. It's the way that a lot of the lifters out here train. They do that. It's a Saturday, Sunday, but one of the key things I put out there is, if they listen or if they don't, most do. That's your whole weekend, man. I mean, you train on Saturday, you go home and you fucking chill. You do nothing
Right.
You don't think of anything stressful. You just chill the fuck out. And then Sunday, you're there in the mornings. And then, Sunday, the squat, Saturday, Sunday's the bench. And then they don't train again until Tuesday.
Yeah.
So then there's that big break, but they got to get through that. And you can't go out fucking partying on Saturday night. You can't, Saturday is, you need to, as Louis used to tell us, you need to learn how to be bored.
Yeah.
So if you're trying to do work and you're trying to do all these other things with 2 back-to-back max effort sessions, good luck.
Right.
It's just good luck to you. It's just not going to happen. It might for a while, but it's just not going to. You're going to run into turbulence.
Yeah,
in
absolutely.
a big fucking way, and then you try to recover from it, and
right,
you can't.
You can't.
It
just piles on.
Yeah, your speed days feel like shit and everything else. We want to jump into the questions here. Sure. Can I get the ball rolling?
All right, first one here for Nate. What are a few things you'd like to see people working with high school athletes do better to prepare them for collegiate level strength training?
One of the biggest things I saw when I was coaching, and I don't know if this is the coach's fault just teach kids how to work hard. A lot of people complain, kids are lazy and this and that. Well, whose fault is that? Who's their mentor? Who's teaching? Who's their coach? Like, you got kids on your team. You can't sit around and complain about them. You have to do something about it. So to help the kid out the most, I think if they know what actual hard work is when they come into a college setting, that's going to help them the most. If you know where they're going to college, if you can kind of get a jump start on techniques that they use at that college, that would probably help to a point, because even in that situation, there's going to be differences between what the college coach has and how the high school coach perceives that program. To go back to the work thing, I used to work with the swimmers, and the one kid on the team was kind of from the country and grew up on a farm and woke up at 4 a.m. every day and had to do chores before he went to school. And he's like, all my teammates complain about how hard these workouts are. He's like, stuff's easy. He's like, it's easy going to practice. You know what I mean? So, like, just if kids kind of understand what hard work is, I think when you first get college freshmen, teaching them what hard work is and how to train, both with like your intensity, quote unquote, not percentage of max, but like just train hard. Those are like your biggest things. If they can kind of get that, they'll be ahead of most people, I think.
I would agree with that. I think it's best taught by example, but
yeah,
you're handcuffed, if it's a high school, because you got to hope you have that one kid, that can show that example. Then it helps if that one kid is actually talented and has skills, because a lot of times it's not true though. You have the kid that busts their ass but doesn't have the maturity, hasn't grown up yet, physically hasn't gone through puberty, and has a super strong work ethic, but it's just getting his ass kicked all over the place. And so then it kind of sends the wrong message. But I do find it funny that, and I've said this a long time, that all the people that are complaining about, how lazy everybody is, they're your kids, dude. You know what I'm saying? It's like, look in the mirror, because this work ethic thing that you're talking about should have been ingrained, a long time ago. I mean, they can be lazy. All kids, this. All kids are going to be lazy given the opportunity. Yeah. Especially
most people.
Yeah, most people. You know what I'm saying? But all you need is that one to step up. Then once that one steps up, you got to have 4 or 5 others that are going to want to step up with them. If those 4 or 5 others aren't the ones that are going to step up with them, that comes back down to the parents' fault. And just to make sure the coaches don't misunderstand, taking them all out and throwing them on a field, making them do 40-40s is not going to make them mentally tougher.
Right. That's not what I was talking about.
That's not going to work. You got to find a way to build that trust to where they're going to want to work for you. How did you do that when you were coaching?
Well, you said lead by example, and when you said that, I don't know if this is just my perception because I was in a better mood or whatever, but as my training went, it seemed like almost everyone's training went. You know what I mean? So, like, you should train. If you're a coach, you should train. And then, like, we had a decent group of, a decent sized group of kids that worked pretty hard. So it actually, like you said, the one kid stepped up and then others started to follow. That's pretty much how it went. If there was kids that were kind of lagging behind, I think a good idea is, maybe spend a little more time with them. You almost like walk them through it and teach them. Like you might have to if you have interns, have the intern just train the shit out of the kid. But then afterward, bring them in your office and explain to them, hey, that was pretty hard today, right? Okay, so when you come in here, that's basically how it's going to go. And then once you start doing that on a consistent basis, you'll start winning more. You'll start doing better, and then you can use your indicator kids, I call them, the kids that work hard. You can use them for an example, like, dude, look at him over there. He trains like that every day. That's why he's an All-American. He didn't, you know what I mean? It didn't just happen. It's kind of like you have to walk them through the process, like doing Navy SEAL drills and log lifts and all this strongman training or whatever. Just kicking the shit out of people doesn't work.
No. I think you'll find out quickly, and just with consulting with coaches over the years, it's been the same story over and over again. There's a handful, not a lot, but there's a handful that are going to bust their ass no matter what you say or do. It's just in their DNA. They're going to bust their ass because they want to be the best they can possibly be, and nothing's going to take them off that track.
Yeah.
You really don't even need to worry about them. You know what? They're going to take care of their own. But the other ones, they're the ones that you got to figure out how to use that freight train to manipulate and motivate the other ones, that the freight train's carrying, right? And then the caboose, you probably got to spend more time with. I guess that's why there's always somebody on there fucking waving,
right?
Because there's always somebody on the caboose, saying you're doing a good job, keep going, keep going. You're not really in last, you're still part of the train,
right?
Keep going, so having that positive element to keep the lower end, because you never know. In college you kind of know, but in high school you never know. That lower end sometimes, man, from 1 year to the next grows 8 inches and puts on 65 pounds, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh shit, maybe I should have taught this fucking kid how to catch.
Right. Exactly.
But I didn't. We just put him on the bench and had him serve water to everybody.
Right.
Now he's Bobby Boucher.
Yeah, now he's the tallest fucker on the field. And he's fast and he's strong, but he can't catch for shit.
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
Right.
So,
or in a weight room example, the kid sprouted up 8 inches, but we didn't think he was a hard worker, so we kind of pushed him off in the corner when we could have put 20 pounds of muscle on him at the same time. But now he's tall and lanky and uncoordinated because...
God, maybe more than 20. I mean,
yeah.
And it happens.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, they grow that like that. What you got next?
All right. Any useful or common cues that you use to coach the deadlift? Whoever wants to start.
I'm going to assume this is an athlete base, so I'm going to first, do you use the deadlift with your athletes at all?
Yeah, I'd always, whenever possible, there's certain groups that you kind of know the motivation and focus and, those things aren't there, so probably not going to put it in. When we could put it in, we did. We had a lot of success with speed pulls. Just for whatever reason, I think deadlift's a great exercise, but I think if you're, doing it heavy every week, they got too many other things going on. Even with lifters, I think it's a lot, but, we seem to have a lot of success with deadlift. We typically would teach it sumo first because they're really bad at that. So we would try to get them somewhat proficient at that. And then we would switch it up every 2 weeks or so, go sumo conventional. The big cues that we used, we would kind of teach it as basically just a high box squat. You know what I mean? And for like taller, lankier athletes, we'd start them off in a rack. Maybe start them on pin 2 and then work them down as their mobility got better.
Now, if they were really tall, would you just always keep them on the pins? Say basketball players.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's not much,
Yeah.
There's no point to... Because for them to go all the way down to a standard diameter plate...
Yeah.
It's like a 6-inch deficit for me.
Yeah, it's like us pulling with dimes.
It's terrible. I don't make myself do that. The big cues were pretty much match up your box squat. Knees out, push out and pull back were our big ones, because I wanted them to learn to push out on their feet and drive their shoulders back at the same time. One of the biggest problems we would see is their ass would fly up first and then their shoulders. So if you tell them to pull back sooner, as long as the bar's in tight, we did all the typical standard stuff, get the bar in tight to your legs before you pull and stuff, but typically we would see the butt come up first and then the shoulders. So we would have them look up a little bit and then just tell them to pull back sooner. And it was usually a timing thing. So if you communicate shoulders back first, it kind of fixes that timing thing. Those are the big ones. Push out, pull back, pull back sooner.
With your athletes, because I'm curious to this one, because I wrote an article a couple months back about when we did the last seminar out here. Like after 20 years of doing seminars, like slaps me in the face that I'm using different cues with every different person. That you have your go-to cue, right? Like, oh fuck, this doesn't work. So you go to another one, then you go to another one,
right.
Then you go another, then boom, finally it works. And then you realize, fuck, what I just told them, they shouldn't tell anybody else, because that's really not what they're doing. Say it's a squat and I'm telling somebody to sit back on their heels. Well, I'm doing that because they're everything else is working right.
Yeah.
Right. But they're still coming up a little bit, and they're rooting, they're doing everything else. But when I tell them to sit back on their heels, they're still grabbing, they're still turning, they're still pressing, but that's what worked. Now, if somebody was just to record that little clip and then put it out there, they're going to say, oh, Dave says you have to sit back on your heels. Now everybody's got fucking wedges under their feet. You see what I'm saying?
Don't get me going on the
where
wedges.
That's what it took for that one person. And that's what happens during seminar situations, because you got people coming in from different training backgrounds, different gyms. You find that weak points and technical issues are demographic. At least I did.
Really?
Like if you go to the East Coast to teach, everybody there did exactly the same fucking thing wrong in the squat. Or in Texas, everybody there was doing exactly the same thing. So for the powerlifting type seminars. So it's like, it got to a point where I could see somebody meet and say, oh yeah, that fucking guy's from Texas, that guy's from Jersey, that guy's from Ohio, for whatever reason. Now, when you bring it down to the college athlete, which is a beginner, did the same verbal cues work for everybody? Because they are basically beginners at weight training?
Worked for most. I would say 80%. We had our go-to, like you said, we had our go-tos that would work for most of the population. And then every once in a while you'd get like kind of an outlier.
Yeah.
And you see that, but same with the exercises too. Like people, like the hinging thing. People talk about how hard it is to get people. I don't think it's that hard. Every once in a while we'd get the kid that comes in that had a pre-existing disc issue, and his hamstrings were wound up so tight. Like I literally could not push my hands on it. He could not hinge. But for the most part, most of the cues work with most of the kids. That's a great point you brought up with what you say in your cue might not be 100%. Like when you're learning a new skill, you have to overemphasize things to get it, I think. I think the same is true with cueing. Like you have to over explain to the person for it to click sometimes. So like you said, if someone from the outside sees that, it might not work for them because they're not in the situation, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, the way, for those listening that don't quite, because there are some people that completely 100% think cues are bullshit and serve no purpose. But part of the learning process, which is funny to me because every coach I've ever had in any sport whatsoever is always using some type of fucking cue. But the more that you cue verbally, say the more I cue to you, you need to hear it, 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 then you're going to finally hear it and respond. Hear it and respond. Hear it and respond. And then after hundreds of times or whatever it's going to take, now you're going to start telling yourself. But when you tell yourself, it's going to be in my voice. All right, so it's going to be knees out, knees out, knees out, but it's going to be in my voice. And then it's 100 more reps, knees out. Now it's in your voice. Then 100 more reps, it's completely automatic.
Right.
All right. And that's the goal, is you want that skill to become completely automatic. Well, that skill starts with how it's taught. And one thing I think I see a lot of strength coaches miss is, it's so simple. If you're telling somebody, if you're standing, usually you're not standing in front of them, you're standing off to the side and it's a squat. If you're telling them to, brace harder, push their knees out, pull their chin back, and every time you tell them something, they look at you, okay, then they're a visual learner. And here's the thing, it's so easy to fix, but most people have never studied or looked into this. You have to quit saying, pack your neck. You have to start saying, picture yourself packing your neck. And now they no longer turn and look at you because they're visual learners. So now all your whole dialogue has to completely change. So when you're explaining to them, look, you need to start thinking about you and how you see yourself packing your neck. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Compared to just taking for granted that person that will just respond to the cue. Because some people have to see things, and that's the same person that you want to record and say, look, here's where you did it right, here's where you did it wrong. And that will go so much further than trying to just tell them, where it can go the opposite way. If they're more audible, right? You can show them all the videos you fucking want and they're still going to fuck it up. You have to be right there telling them, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this. And it's just simple. To me, it's like coaching 101. It's like, where the fuck did you all miss this? This is like, fucking teachers know this in grade school, that if a kid's not looking straight ahead, they're not paying. You know what I'm saying? It's just simple crap like that. But it makes a big difference. And especially if you're doing seminars and stuff like that, because you have, again, diverse backgrounds, or you have a lot of athletes. And I'd be really interested to see, because I bet you're going to find the same quality in different sports. Like, say, sports that require more visual acuity. Football, for instance, linebackers have, quarterbacks and so forth. They might be more visual than sports like swimming.
Yeah.
That doesn't require a whole lot of visual. It would be very interesting to know, just going through the coaching, if that theory plays out.
You bring up a lot of good points. I'm just thinking to like all my football strength coach friends that complain about how the dumb their guys are or whatever. Just thinking back, maybe open your knees isn't the best way to coach those guys.
You got to change it.
You know what I mean? But like to the cueing, like our first 2 weeks when we were introducing the lifts, like we cued everything. It was like, okay, hips under the bar, stand up strong, set your feet, chin up a little bit, stomach in, butt back first, and it was it's constantly all day. But then as they got better over a couple weeks, then you can cut it down and kind of let them go and just pick little things out here that they need to work on.
It's overwhelming at first, there's no doubt,
but
then they pick up on stuff.
Right.
The easy ones they pick up on, but there's always the stragglers.
And to the visual, we used to have maybe you probably just described this kid. We used to have a wrestler, and we would, like you said, we'd be at the side and we would say something, and he'd have a loaded bar on his back and say, what?
Mm-hmm.
Say, don't turn. You're gonna wreck your back or whatever.
Mm-hmm. But see, that's a kid that if he was trying to learn a new move, he needs to see that move. He doesn't need to really. He needs to see it before somebody drills it with him,
right?
Because he's not gonna get it. But if he sees it first, he may be able to replicate it,
right,
without even having somebody show them. You know what I'm saying?
Or maybe had really good manners. He's going to look us in the eye when he's talking to us. He had really good manners. I don't know. But that's that kid. You started talking about that, and it just took me in a time warp.
Oh, yeah. What we got up next?
All right, for Nate, what kind of changes have you implemented in the traditional conjugate system and seen success with?
It's hard to say what's the traditional conjugate system. You know what I mean? Things that we've done over the years that I think have made a difference. Probably, I don't know how many years ago. Years ago, I Donnie Thompson put out his squat cycle when he was making a run at the squat record. He put that out, and I tried it, and it worked. And then we tried it with our throwers, and it worked. One of the big things I took from that I wasn't doing before was using accommodating resistance on max effort and dynamic stuff. So like in the past, most of our max effort stuff was typically straight weight. For whatever reason, I think putting the accommodating resistance on seemed to help everybody. Like with our athletes, we put that in, and we weren't in a time of year when we were doing many jumps at all, and even their jumps went up. And like that was our throwers. The throwers always kind of hang around over the summer, and I could experiment on them a little bit because they were pretty technically proficient and stuff. And I saw that with them, so it was like, okay, sprinters are doing this too. Another thing I took from that was using lower weights on dynamic day. You know, at the time Donnie was squatting 1200 or whatever, mid 12s, but on his speed days, he would never go over 3 to 4 plates. And granted, he was doing his speed work out of the straps, so it's a different stimulus. But I think so with our kids, what we did a little bit of the strap stuff, but we lowered the percentages down, and I think this helped my training too. But put more accommodating resistance on. So I don't know if having a little bit lighter load in the bottom and giving them more of a chance to accelerate and then have to push harder as you went up, I don't know if that was what helped with that. But once we started doing more of that, it seems like squats went up, and things kind of took off a little bit. Some other things.
With the strap stuff, was it descending straps over a period of weeks, or was it the same strap height?
Same strap height.
Okay, and then was it paused on the strap or just a light touch?
Pause. We'd make a pause. Yep. And like we moved the straps up a little bit. Like when we would go off a box, we would do our best to make them be at parallel. With the straps, it will beat your hips up a little bit. So if they were an inch or two above, it was okay, and things worked out. Because I think they got practice and stuff they have to deal with too. Even doing it myself, I don't have to go run and stuff. But I was finding that if I was down like at competition parallel, it was pretty rough after a few weeks.
Yeah.
So that helped. Reverse hyper was a big thing. We had, like, again, I did it myself. I used to have a ton of back problems. Helped those. We started putting it in warm-ups with our athletes. Our back, like, we hardly had any back issues. And I think that was huge for our basketball players. They run so much. They're coaches, and so if you're a high school kid, you got travel league, you got your team, that you're just being pounded into the ground. And a lot of them don't strength train. And a lot of them are built so that they have the anterior pelvic tilt, the tight hip flexors. They're prone to that injury. Our basketball players were, healthy for the most part. Our other athletes, I can't think of many other back issues, so I know that was a big help. Abs every day. Those are kind of general program things, but those are probably a couple things I can think of off the top of my head that made a big difference.
When you're consulting with the coaches now and they're using Conjugate, where do you see they're making the biggest mistakes?
Exercise technique. Just doing the basic movements correctly. I think one of the biggest things is keeping a perpendicular shin on box squat. And that's not a popular thing right now because ankle mobility has come in, and I understand you have to have somewhat decent mobility in your ankles and stuff, but we all talk about training posterior chain and glutes and hamstrings. Well, when my knee goes forward in the squat, guess what I'm not doing? I'm not loading glutes and hamstrings. So that's like a perpendicular shin is probably one of the biggest things, and just general overall exercise technique. If you're training correctly and the weight room movements are done correctly, you'll take care of a ton of problems. You can build so much injury prevention and stuff into your programs that you don't even need to think about. But it's tough. I get it. It's tough. You got a room full of 30, 40 kids. It's hard to get everybody perfect. But if there was one thing I could say that we could do a better job at is weight room movements.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Most certainly.
Yeah. All right. Do you have any tips for someone who works a manual labor job and trains for powerlifting competitions at the same time?
Get a different job.
Well, you know, I get asked this every week when I do the AMA. I swear to God. Every week. It's been going on for fucking ever. I probably asked this 20 years ago. Let me put it to you this way. The people that I know that have a manual labor job that have been powerlifting for 5 or 6 years aren't complaining about their manual labor job. All right, the people that are asking about the manual labor job are the ones that just took a manual labor job and then want to know how this is going to impact their training. Your body will acclimate to it. You know, will it negatively impact your training from the beginning? Well, if all you do is lay on a couch and smoke dope, you know, and fucking eat all day long and that's it, that's your recovery, then yeah, it's probably going to take a little hit on your training. You know, whereas the manual labor guy was probably always, that I'm talking about, was probably always doing manual labor and then just started powerlifting. And then it didn't impact him whatsoever. So my usual answer is, you know, your body will get used to it and all this other kind of stuff. What I want to say, you know, but I'm not going to say it in the DM because, you know, text can be taken the wrong way, is just quit making fucking excuses about why you're going to be weak. You know, there's more than one person. It's not like this is Michael Jordan that we're talking about in basketball. There's more than one person doing manual labor and powerlifting. There's like 80,000 people powerlifting just in the USA. Out of that, I'm probably going to guess about 3,000 or 4,000 do manual labor work, and they're making PRs without excuses.
Yeah.
So just fucking do your job. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And, you know, your body will become used to it. The same question would apply to people who start shift work that are normally doing a 9 to 5. Yes, there's going to probably be a transition period where you got to figure some shit out. And the answer that they don't want to hear, and this is in both cases, is the answer probably is you're going to have to skip some training days.
Yep.
You know, there's going to, while you're getting acclimated, you might not be able to train 4 or 5 times a week.
Scale it back a little bit.
You might have to dump it back to twice a week. If it's a really rough week, maybe once. But go with how you feel, get acclimated, and then before you know it, I would say within 2-3 months, you'll be right back on point.
Yeah.
You know, everything's solid, and you're going to have fucking more income. You know, because I assume the reason you're taking the job is because it's paying more than the job that you had, or you didn't have a job in the first place.
Right.
You know, so
yeah, they can't see past the 3 or 4 months that it's going to take to kind of get in the groove, and
yes,
you know what I mean. Just hang in there and scale it back a little bit.
And I hate to be the guy to say back in my day, but you know, back when I started powerlifting, the strongest fucking guys were the ones that were doing the manual labor work. You know, because they had. I mean, this is before I knew about GPP, extra workouts, recovery, all that other kind of shit. You know, they basically were doing that. You know, and it's, God, I can't remember the lifter now, but he was a all-time world record holder. It might come to me before I finish the story. It was a truck driver, you know, so, I mean, he'd drive 16-hour shifts, whatever it was. Once a week, he'd stop in the gym someplace, hit all 3, once a week.
Really?
Hit all 3 lifts, and then he trained once a week and was in a truck most of the fucking time. Oof. Okay, now that's not manual labor, but that's still, if you want to talk about what's worse for your physique or your back, sitting all day in a truck 20 years ago, which I'm sure those seats were, you know, ergonomically designed, you know, a fucking piece of plywood with, you know, some bubble wrap, you know, is basically what he had. And still managed to go break, you know, all-time world records. If anybody knows who I'm talking about, go ahead and post it in the comments as a reference. Right now, it's not hitting me, but if it does, I'll make a post somewhere. What we got next?
Okay. What do you guys disagree on training-wise, if anything?
Nothing.
Well,
come on,
nothing and everything. You know, it's. Do we have anybody that's actually on the live feed for YouTube right now?
I already answered a lot of those, but I'll take a look.
But is there anybody there? Like, hello?
You know,
just say hello if they're there. Somebody say fucking hello.
That last question brings up a good point. Kind of, we were talking about the different types of periodization. Like, if you kind of take a step back and look at all these different things we subscribe to and treat as religion, which I'm probably guilty of myself, there's probably more commonalities than we think.
Yeah.
You know,
Is there anybody there?
Yeah, they're saying, hey.
Okay, here's what I want you guys to do. Give us a topic. Give me a topic. It can be a method. It can be, a style of training. It can be just throw any topic out there that's training related. What do we got coming up? I can't read that.
So far, nothing. Sumo deadlifts is the first one.
That's that's not really a debatable
Strongman
thing.
training, best bench press bars, strength coaches versus football coaches, Nate's conjugate system at the college.
I need something training method related.
Okay. What do you think of RTS? Supersets for strength training.
Okay. Supersets for strength training. What do you want? The pro or the con?
I don't care.
Okay.
You're the boss. I'll let you pick.
Okay. You take the cons. Okay. So tell me why supersets for strength training are fucking awful.
Supersets for strength training are fucking awful because when you are supersetting with a strength athlete, we're trying to get strong. We're not trying to get in shape. This isn't CrossFit, right? But seriously, to me, it's at some point the supersets are going to draw from your ability to get stronger because of the conditioning aspect. If I'm going for as much strength as I can, I don't want to superset because, like I said, the conditioning stuff. At some point, I'm going to get tired going back and forth between this exercise, and exercise A is going to start negatively affecting exercise B from a strength standpoint.
Okay. Now, see, I would say that supersets would have a beneficial effect because if you have a weak point, let's say it's your elbows, and your elbows are a little dinged up and you can't train them real hard with the movements that make them strong, say a close grip bench press, reverse grip bench, rolling dumbbell tricep extensions. If I was to pre-fatigue those with band push downs or regular push downs and then do that exercise, the muscle's not going to know the difference between the weight that's on the bar. All they know is the fatigue and the non-fatigue. So I'm still going to get that heavy set of 5 that I'm looking for from a stimulus standpoint because the muscle's pre-exhausted. The other thing that the supersets can do is as part of your warm-up, you can run actually more of a giant set and be able to get more work done for the warm-up in a shorter period of time. And based upon the rest interval of the superset, if it's pre-exhaust or if it's just 1 minute rest or not, you're going to get more work, and then we can fall back and say this can also become a great recovery modality for the day after training to be able to flush and get a pump in the muscle to be able to put more nutrients there to help it recover. The reason I did this, guys, is because we don't agree or disagree on any methods. When it comes to training, the answer is always, if you know training, it depends, no matter what it is. So we could have taken the box squat and I've had you go pro and I go negative. We can sit here, I can give you 20 reasons why you shouldn't box squat and 20 reasons why you should. And if you're a coach and you can't do that, then your bias is too strong and your decision making is going to be poor. So you should know the negatives of everything that you're doing in training. So you talked about shin angle, for the box squat. The negatives associated with that.
Let's
and
hear
the positives associated. The shin angle?
No, let's hear the positives and the negatives.
The shin angle thing?
No, for the box squat.
What, the negatives for the box squat?
Yeah, you just said 20 negatives, 20 positives.
Okay, well, I've already written an article on the 20 positives, but do you want me to refresh all those?
There's no negative aspects to the box squat at all.
There is. I mean,
joking.
Yeah. You got the issues with coaches not knowing how to coach it correctly, so the spinal compression is going to be out of hand. Even if they do know how to coach it correctly, and you're sitting down there, you're pausing, you're staying tight, your organs and your internal shit is still being compressed between a barbell and a box. So we're not talking about the spine. We're talking about there's no way that you're going to be able to sit there and not lose some degree of tightness with a slight pause on the box. The other thing is box heights are a bitch if you got different athletes training on the same rack. So you got this timing issue where you're trying to get things done and you got to change the box height, not only the box height, but it could be a monolift. It just slows the fuck out of everything. For the most part, the athletes don't listen, and they're gonna tap at the box. They're not gonna box squat. They're gonna squat to the box. So it's just gonna be a quick touch. But no matter what you do, it's a hard habit to break. So that slowly becomes, as soon as you turn away and you're not watching, it's no longer a tap, it's a crash. All right, and then from a coach's standpoint, now you got to fucking stand there. Sit on the box, 1001 up, 1001 up. And now all your fucking time is being wasted trying to, you get where I'm going. I can keep going on and on and on. But that you need to know that. You need, not only, it's not like we need to know this for this great debate that you need to know this just to be an effective coach. Yeah. Because there's no perfect exercise and there's no bad exercise. It's the application of the exercise. It's the same as with the methods. So anytime you program a method, yes, you're going to have bias. I have bias, you have bias. You have to know what the fuck your bias is. Because if you start seeing that you're doing the same things with the same exact things with every athlete, I'll guarantee it's not optimal for the athlete. Yeah. Your bias is taking over a little bit too much. So then you can dial it back. It also becomes, a fun exercise for when, you do, debate with somebody and they, you already know what they're going to say.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, dude, you just gave me 5 reasons why box squats are bad. You forgot these.
Right.
Then they don't, what the fuck? Well, here's why I decided to do it. Then that works that way. But I think that's just effective coaching. I think that's actually an important element in anything that you do, any job you do. Any decision that you make, it's called a decision because you had to decide between the pros and the cons of one, attribute to decide which you think is going to be a better outcome. All right. And the art of training is you think is always a part of that. Now, if you don't have the cognitive background to know the negatives of all the things that you're doing, then you probably shouldn't be coaching. You're probably not, or you need to limit the scope of what you are coaching. Just coach 5 movements. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And that's it. And then learn, the pros and cons behind what you're doing. Because at some point in time, if you are a collegiate coach, somebody at some point in time, probably a position coach, is going to ask you why the fuck you're doing what you're doing. And not only do you have to answer them, but you have to answer them like you're speaking to a 3-year-old, which you should anytime you answer anybody. So you have to dumb it down to the lowest level, and you have to be prepared for what they're going to say, which is probably going to be one of the negatives.
Yes. And
if you're prepared for what those negatives are because you already know them, hell, you could preempt it, by saying, a lot of coaches that ask this question are usually concerned about, how it impacts the spine during the movement. Well, here's how we overcome that. We overcome that by teaching the athletes to actually brace better. We strengthen their torso, or actually if it's a coach, we strengthen their core. So they can really handle this. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And now you're speaking their language because now all they're hearing is the core stronger. I like this. This is good. This is good. They have no idea that to them, you're no longer talking about a box squat. So,
yeah, you definitely got to know your audience and what they're looking for.
All right. Question from a novice: what to do to work with a weak lower back?
Make it stronger.
And how to do that?
We don't know what they're doing. I'll just
it's broad, obviously.
Yeah, I'll take a guess and start doing back extensions. Like 3 sets of 20. Do them twice a week. do like a low back crunch. Grab a med ball, like a 10-pound med ball, and get an RDL stance. Roll your torso over, and then arch up, so it's like a crunch for your low back. Your low back will burn like crazy. Do those twice a week, and on your lower body days, do one day that's lighter weight, just body weight, like real high volume, 4 sets of 20, 30, 40, and then make it a little bit heavier on your other day, and that'll probably help you out in like 2 months. So probably your back strength will come up, in addition to your main lifts, obviously. But if they're novice, I'm guessing that's something they're probably not doing.
Thinking about the question just a little more, as Nate was speaking, it's a novice asking about their lower back, which I question why a novice would be asking about their lower back. So why is that question happening in the first place? And the only thing that I can think of is they don't think it's a weak point because they're getting stuck on any of their lifts anywhere. It probably hurts.
Yep.
So if their lower back hurts, then I would put in the McGill 3. Learn how to stabilize, learn how to move, throughout the day. So more of McGill's work, and actually, McGill and Carroll's book, The Gift of Injury, is a really good one to look at, just to make sure that you're getting out of bed properly, that you get out of a chair. People really fuck this up, and I would say it's probably why most people's backs are fucked up. It's not because of the 4 sets of squats that they did, or the three heavy sets of deadlifts that they did. It's because they don't know how to fucking pick up a laundry basket. They don't know how to get out of bed without twisting. They don't know how to stand up out of a chair. They sit like shit. They have poor posture. That kind of stuff, while it all sounds stupid, plays a major role, because it's like comparing 10 minutes of training in the gym to 15 hours of what you do the whole rest of the day. And if you sleep on your stomach, all right, so now we're going another 8 hours, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that's the direction I would send. And if it is, severe pain, obviously see somebody that's a practitioner to be able to help you, to show you a little bit more of what we're talking about here.
All right, what's better for squat progression? Pause squats, speed squats, or tempo squats?
Confused about the progression part.
Yeah, that was the whole question there. I'm not sure.
I don't know how to answer that one, because the progression is implying that we're going somewhere. Like it's going to be some type of plan that's laid out.
But you don't know what it is.
Yeah. And I don't know very many people that are going to run like 8 weeks of tempo squats or 8 weeks of pause squats. What was the other one?
Speed squats.
Well, the speed squats, we can talk forever about that one, because there are different waves and stuff like that. If they're asking the difference between pause squats, speed squats, and tempo squats, then that's a different discussion.
What's been your experience with pause squat, or have you done much with pause squats and had much success with them? I've never run them much.
My intellectual experience and I've never used them, and I've never had anybody use them. So I have to
right.
Same with pause deadlifts. I have to put that out there. So I can't say one way or another. What I can say is I have seen people use them and get stronger.
Yeah. Okay.
So I do know they work, right? But the part of me that's always hesitant about putting it into any program is the last thing I want to teach a power lifter to do is stop in the middle of a lift. And I'm just looking at the mental conditioning, the mental component. Like I don't want to teach somebody, and usually if you watch any, like a pause deadlift, the first pull before they pause looks like shit. It's not even their normal technique. Then they might adjust into their normal technique for the second part of it. Well, then why didn't you just fucking pull off a pin or a block? So I I know, like I said, I know they work because I've seen it work for people who are really good lifters, and I've seen it work enough times to know, yes, it does work. If I was to implement it into a program, I would probably reach out to one of those lifters to say, look, how did you put it in the program? I wouldn't try to, guess how to slip it in there. But I just don't like the idea of teaching somebody to stop. It's just, I don't like that. But that's once again, it's a personal bias, which I think in coaching and training, your own personal bias sometimes can cut your own dick off. So you got to be aware of what they are, because it could be that one thing that you're keeping from your athlete that could make them way better. Right. So you got to remember who's first. It's the athlete, not your bias. So if that time comes.
They did specify and said, how would you apply those 3 squats into a squat block?
To me, they would be different blocks.
Why is that?
Well, if you're going to talk block training, then the dynamic work, the speed work, would be a block designed just for that explosive strength. Okay? And the pause squat would be actually more for, I don't want to say more from going from it. Yeah, it is actually probably more from going from a static to a dynamic, because it is a complete stop. Where on the box, it's not a complete stop. So there's 2 different things going on. There's actually more than 2 different things, but the biggest thing going on when you sit on a box, there's still some movement while you're on the box. So it is paused, but it's not paused. And then it's deloaded, say 50, 60%, right, whatever it is, while you are paused. When you do a real pause squat, you're in an basically an isometric. You're in a yielding position, all right, where all your muscles are under fire, without moving. So it's essentially an isometric in a way, more of a yielding. So it's a different type of starting strength. So it would be interesting to run, if it's pure block, to run a speed wave for 3 or 4 weeks. You got to have like a deload or a transition week in there, and then maybe a short strength block for a few weeks, and then go back to another speed, and then measure the force watt output and see which one actually correlated to the highest, force production, between the 2, and then go. But you can also go into, there's so many things. There's so many other variables, man, because the problem with a pause squat is on a box squat, I can tell somebody to stop, push your knees out, pull your sternum, up. On a pause squat, I can't say anything when they're in the bottom, because they're just praying to fucking come up.
Trying to survive. Yeah,
they're trying to survive. So a lot of times their form's compromised. What was the third one?
Which ones did you say? Pause squats, speed squats, and tempo squats?
Tempo squats are more, I'm not a big fan of that one. So that's just more just trying to find a way to, I believe it's just find a way to pull more of the eccentric into the training, where, if you're going to go to the hassle of trying to count in your head, 5 seconds on the way down or whatever it's going to be on the way down, just throw some fucking bands on, and you're going to pull more eccentric contraction and more eccentric overload and not have to worry about that. I want people to worry about when they're squatting their technique and not counting,
right?
Because your brain's not going to be doing both. It's going to pick one or the other. If you have anything to add,
I was trying to think between the 3, like how I would set them up, because I'm guessing they're a power lifter, how I would set those up going into a meet. Whenever I try to organize exercises or different stimulus, I try to think of like the contraction types. So like when I used to program like my jumps for the athletes, we would let's say an athlete at their competition needed more reactive ability, so we would generally program from like more what I call a muscle jump, so like a seated box jump or something where you're not drawn on stretch reflex as much, and then as we get closer, go more towards stretch reflex type stuff or reactive ability. So I was trying to think with those 3, how I would organize those.
Well, the tempo would have to be first because you're really, I mean, it's going to be slow on the way up.
Right.
So the stretch reflex, while still being there, is going to be greatly fatigued.
Yeah. And then but then the pause squats. To me, I would want to keep the pause squat. Those three, just running that into a meet, like with those 3 blocks, doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Because to me, as I'm going to the meet, I want my stretch reflex to be the strongest. If we run box squat going into the meet, that's typically not a good idea for people because they get too dependent on the box. Not that it can't be done, but most people aren't going to be able to figure that out. If you're pausing in the bottom, that's going to screw your timing up at the meet. You know what I mean? So I wouldn't want to run that going into the meet. So like to me, those 3, not that they can't be used in conjunction in your training, but I was trying to think of it like running into a meet, but it really doesn't make much sense.
From a conjugate perspective, they could be conjugate variables for max effort work.
Right.
You know, so I mean, the tempo stuff is a good way to still lift maximal weights that are going to be under what your squat max would be, because you're going to have to lower the weight because the time under tension is going to go up. You know, so that's a really good way to get more out of less as far as intensity. You know, from that standpoint, pause squats become a tricky one. You know, on how they're going to fit in there. Because I do think they have their place, and it's just a tricky one on how it's going to fit in if you're going to also be rotating in box squats and stuff like that. Because you got to first decide, are you going to be training the same stance? And this can be a huge, giant conversation that doesn't really need to happen. But I would say err more towards using it for max effort work if it's a conjugate person, and use it for different exercises. So maybe, you know, it's just a method that you throw in with the max effort method. So I mean, that's conjugate, right? Conjugate is throwing as much shit together as you fucking possibly can. You know, so if you don't have bands, you know, use slow eccentrics, you know, and, you know, go without.
I'm glad you brought the tempo squats up. That's something I've been doing the last few months in my training. I probably would have done more of when I was coaching. On our speed days, we'll do like a 4 or 5 second eccentric. I feel like it's helped, even on bench a little bit. I feel like it's helped take a little bit of the beating off myself, and it's definitely helped me put on some weight too, help build some tissue without killing myself with maximal weights. So like looking back, that's something I would have done more of. The person asked about what did I do to manipulate the system. That's something I should have done. And the way I would have programmed it was I'd probably do the slower eccentrics far out from a competition, right? Because that would be kind of a general. And then as we get closer, for 90% of athletes, we want them to be faster. So kind of phase into like more of a faster eccentric box squat. But that seemed to help out quite a bit the last few months.
Yeah, I see that more with the hypertrophy.
Yep. Which most kids need. Most high school, college athletes need.
Oh, yeah.
All right, how do you determine if an athlete would be better with more or less days in the gym?
A lot of their outside factors. You know, obviously we want to train as much as we can and push them along as much as we can, but you have to be able to realize if they're not recovering. And for the most part, I think most athletes can hang with 4 days a week and you can get done what you need to do there. Sometimes you have to go 3 because of their schedule, their sports schedule, the coach's schedule. In general, 3 to 4 days a week is going to be fine. I don't think you need 5 or 6 days a week. It's too much, or even 7, you know, unless you're a bodybuilder and that's all you do. Yeah, you want to try to push them along because we want to maximize the results, right? But you can go too far, obviously.
Yeah. A lot of times, I mean, they use the word athlete, so it means somebody's coaching them. A lot of times they're not going to have that choice. You know, so it's whatever the coach is doing is what they're going to have to do. It's not like they can say, hey, look, coach, I need to take the day off. It's like, well, you know, what the fuck? It can't happen. Now, if it's, you know, a personal training type of situation or a bodybuilding type of situation, one of the things that I was taught early on during my first bodybuilding little stint was to always train 1 day less per week than what you want to. That way you're always going to be hungry to get back in. You know, so if you trained every day, 7 days a week, I don't care how hardcore you are, it's still gonna be a drag. Even when you're in the infancy phase and you love all of it. Like the longer you do the shit, you do it for 15, 20 years, like 90% of the sessions are a fucking drag. It's like you don't want to do most of them. It's like, fuck this. And you don't actually decide that you're really going to do it until after you warm up. You're like, fuck it, okay, let's roll. Or when you walk through the gym, or there's a certain time where it's going to click in. But now that I don't really train for anything, I always make sure that the amount of training I do, especially now, because I mean, I'm to a point where I'm just like, fuck the whole thing and not train it at all. But I always make it under what I want. That way I don't say, fuck it, I don't ever want to go again. It's like, all right, it might be 7 more days, but I know when I'm going to fucking train again. And I'm looking forward to it because I purposely made it that way. Is it optimal for what I'm trying to do? No, because it's probably not enough days. But non-optimal is better than none. And I think that's where people get mixed up sometimes. It's just like, oh, it's not optimal, so if it's not optimal, fuck it, I'm not going to do anything.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Even people that aren't athletes, their schedule might not be up to them how many times they're going to be able to get to the gym. Mm-hmm. You know, you got so many other responsibilities and stuff going on.
Yeah, go one day.
Right.
You know, and it's, well, I don't want to go 1 day because it probably won't do a whole lot for me. Just go 1 day. You know, first off, it's going to do more for you than what you think it will, but go 1 day because it sets you up to go 2, even if it's a year later. This is like if I'm talking to an aunt or something like that.
Right.
You know, if you can be consistent and hit 3 sessions a month, that's 3 more than you're doing now.
Yeah.
You
just
know,
look for improvements.
Yeah, you got to start somewhere.
Okay. For overhead pressing, when there's a weakness in one side, how do you compensate?
Let it catch up. Give it time and let the weak side catch up. If you make sure you don't have an injury, a lot of times there could be something brewing that's not an acute injury. Thinking back to my shoulders, my one shoulder a few years ago, like all my heavy bench presses, every once in a while I'd hit a heavy bench, and for whatever reason the arm would just kind of give out and kind of drift off or whatever. And then it showed up a few years later. So make sure you don't have anything wrong going on, but let the weak side catch up. It's an overhead press. You don't have to go to a competition and win your paycheck on an overhead press. So give it time to catch up.
I don't like the overhead press, so I'm not going to answer it.
Me neither. They feel like shit 90% of the time.
All right, Dave wrote that with a short torso and long femurs, a squatter can squat any stance that they like. Any comments on this and specific lifters to follow to study their technique?
I don't know what there is to comment. I mean, I said you can pretty much squat however the fuck you want. Yeah, I'm a little, I don't know. I don't get the question.
Okay. We can go on to a different one. Nate, do your athletes ever use a trap bar?
No. Not that it's terrible. I know it's really popular right now. We didn't have very many of them. I'm not a big fan of the exercise. To me, it's a close stance quarter squat. And we all talk about how important the posterior chain is, and we load up that thing, and it's to me it's kind of not training what we're trying to train or what we say we want to train. And we always just we would work deadlifts in, and we really didn't have to use it. So I get people are a fan of it because it's convenient and that type of thing. But I've never been a big fan of it. So I'm not. It's not one I'm going to go to.
This is it's a funny West Side story, and people I need to put this out here. When I'm telling West Side stories, these are like 20 years old. So Louis could think completely different today than he does now. I don't know, but I assume he's still not a big fan of the bar. But when I was training there, a hex bar or trap bar made its way into the gym. And so, of course, new shit, we're going to use it for max effort work. I fucking liked it, because I was really fucking strong at it. And I was one of the guys where I was stronger pulling from a deficit than I was off the floor. My quads are stronger than my hamstrings and glutes. By the end of, after that day, we never saw the bar again. And it disappeared. So it either went in the dumpster with a lot of the other shit that got sent to the gym or not. But the reason why it went into the dumpster is we weren't there to develop quads. We were there to develop the posterior chain. Anything that's going to develop quads is going to get thrown out the fucking back door. So it was gone. And it's not like, fuck, I was good at this. I get my, because my weak point was the glutes and actually my glutes were the biggest weak point. So, and it's like, this is like fucking completely overriding that. It's like, fuck yes, I can pull like a motherfucker. And then I think, people, like, I don't even know. I think it maxed out too, because I'm pretty damn sure Vogelpool would have been able to fill up the whole bar and do it for
I've seen that.
5. But anyhow, when I finally asked Louis about it, that was the reason why is, it's just all quads. We're not here to train quads. If you want to train quads, go down to the gym, to the bodybuilding gym.
Right.
If you want to train hamstrings and your posterior chain, then that's what we're here to do. And that was kind of drilled in our head, but I thought it was funny that, it's the one goddamn thing I was good at ended up being thrown out the fucking back door.
Just teach your kids to pull.
Yeah.
All right, what are your thoughts on stretching, pre and or post workout in general?
If it helps, do it. We never did a whole lot of it. I like Dick Hartzell's band mobility stuff better, like from 20 years ago now. If you YouTube hip mobility, Dick Hartzell, it'll come up. But it's just like a 4 or 5 exercise series for your hips, and then the old shoulder traction with the band up around the rack, and then twist and let your shoulder kind of suck out and open up. Those are my go-tos instead of static stuff. We didn't really program much static stuff in.
This is always like a trick question to me, because no matter how I answer it, they're gonna be like, "Well, yeah, you have 2 fake hips." It's like, fucker, it's not because of that. I have a lot of. I don't have a theory on stretching. I have a lot of thoughts on stretching. So we'll just put it that way. If you're a strength coach, more than likely you're going to be dealing with, it may change now, but old school methods still filter down through football coaches. So they're still going to have their routine that they're going to do out on the field, which is probably some of the dumbest shit that you've ever seen. But you know what? There's different ways to look at this. They're really not doing anything that's going to hurt them, right? And these are the same things that the players have been doing since they were pee-wee football players. Right. So let's just take away the flexibility component, which really isn't being trained, and take away the mental component. Okay, they're going from the locker room to a first down. Okay, this is part of the preparation that they've done since they were kids. Yep. That gets them, okay, motherfucker, it's time to play. Okay, so if they're doing their school name jumping jacks, all right, then they're fucking doing their school name jumping jacks, and that is what it is. As long as there's nothing there that's going to hurt them, like holding the fucking helmet for the neck, static shit that they used to do, and crap like that. Then you want to step in there. From a powerlifter perspective, the thoughts again. I've always had the thought of, yes, I do think that you have to be warmed up. Now, how you get warmed up, that's going to depend upon the coach. It's going to depend on the individual and what they actually need to warm up. And a warm up isn't going to involve stretching for the most part, but sometimes it might. If I come in to do any kind of squat training and my lower back feels too tight, like it's always going to feel tight, but if it's too tight, then I may do the dreaded foam roller for a couple passes on my lower back just to get it too tight, not too loose, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
But just too tight. So wherever, the more advanced lifter is going to completely understand what I'm talking about. I'm going to leave a novice here in the dust for a minute, but you know, a novice isn't going to be as prone to injury because the weights are going to be lower. You know, as Louis used to say, you're not strong enough to get hurt. You know, but to some degree, if your technique's solid, that's true. If your technique's not solid, that's not true. So you have to be in the state that you're ready to lift. So if your quads are too tight, you know, and it may be to the point where you do a couple free squats on the box, you're like, God damn, you know, this fucking quad just something, it ain't right. Well, you stretch it, you know, then okay, now it's there. Now you don't have to go any further. You're at your baseline, you're good. All right, that's what you need to be, to me, in the gym, is whatever that first exercise is, you need to be at the baseline to be able to do the first set that's loaded, even if it's just the bar, with good technique. If you can't do that first set with good technique, then you need to do more free squatting, you need to do more mobility work, more hanging leg raises, pull down abs, whatever it's going to be, to open up. Usually it's the hips, you know, to open up the hips to be able to do that. You don't want to pre-fatigue it. You know, I think that's the dumbest fucking thing in the world. You know, let's do a whole ton of rotator cuff work, then go bench. Real fucking smart idea there, dipshit. Pre-fatigue, you know, your stabilizers, then go bench. Makes a lot of sense. Now, post-training, Jim did a lot of stretching post-training, and it didn't hurt anybody. Because I've never seen, well, I don't want to say that because, you know, the demographics have changed. I rarely see powerlifters who are hypermobile. You know, it's very unlikely. Most of them can't tie their fucking shoes. Okay, so if after they train, if they spend a little time, you know, doing some foam roller work or just something to get, you know, some of the tightness out. It can be, I use the foam roller because that's what Rustin showed me, but I actually have better luck using like the car buffer and shit like that because I'm lazy and I can sit down and do it all right there than just then lay on the floor and stretch. But you don't want to stretch something that's tight. You see what I'm saying? So I think stretching post-training can help with recovery, but you have to, the muscles can't be tight. Right? We're not talking about bodybuilding and tearing fascia and trying to find a way to, you know, build muscle. That would be a different discussion. Or later in the night, you know, I think it can have applications if you can't fucking tie your shoes and shit like that. But most won't, because the reason they can't tie their shoes is because they haven't done anything to maintain the mobility in the first place. But I think it can help with the recovery to a degree, but to stretch, like hard stretching before training, I think is a huge mistake. Yeah. Huge mistake.
All right. Pick your 4 favorite specialty bars for bench press training along with exercise used for both you guys.
Dave, what 2 bars can you use and not hurt when you bench? Just list those.
Limited, you know. Fuck. For me, it's not so much. I mean, I'll use the cambered American press bar. I don't really care if it's the angled grips or the regular grips. They're both fine with me. And then I flip it backwards, so it's, you know, kind of like using a shoulder saver pad. That, and I mean, that's about all I can. Well, I like the rackable cambered bar. I take that back. I like the rackable cambered bar. It's hard to do for speed work. You can't do it for speed work because it's throwing you all over the place too much. But it's good for max effort work. You know, now I have to throw a goalpost pad, which is like a shoulder saver pad, on it. But I really do like it for max effort work because it's something that you can put in there. I like a lot of max effort work that ends up becoming submaximal. So it's not as high as what their raw bench would be. It's a little bit lower. And then I will phase that, you know, into the program to help with the recovery, because how you're going to recover from that is going to be completely different than how you're going to recover from a super heavy 2-board press. You know, that's kind of 2 different animals. Raw or geared makes no difference. They're just 2 entirely different animals with that. And then I like the for the shoulder issues that I have, I can bench with the Tsunami bar. So I do like that. but I like the bamboo bar for the static holds. So I don't like the tsunami bar for the static holds. All right, it doesn't have enough movement because it oscillates. It doesn't, like throw you all over the place. Where the bamboo bar doesn't oscillate, kind of throws you all over the place. So the bamboo bar, holding that for time, just load it up with something light, hold it for a song, and hope it's not a long song, but irregardless, that's what you hold it for. So that would be it for me. But two of them are very specific just to my shoulder stability. So it really isn't going to play a whole lot of roles into. Actually, all of it is specific to that.
Dave took my answers. I like the American cambered grip bar. I like the one with the angled handles better for whatever reason. The completely neutral grip kind of lights my shoulders up. And I've seen this with not a lot, but a few athletes, like probably, 15 years ago, like people started figuring it out that a neutral grip might be better for your shoulders when you press with dumbbells and stuff. But the angled handles on the grip bar or that angle, even with dumbbells, like with kids that I've dealt with shoulder issues, seems to be more forgiving than a completely neutral grip. So I would pick the angled handles over the neutral grip. One thing with that I do notice with that, if I go too close, it's kind of weird on my pecs. Like I kind of get handcuffed, so it's not a comfortable thing. You got to kind of play with the grip width and make sure you're hitting the right one. But that bar has actually saved quite a bit of wear and tear on my shoulders. I had a partial. It was like 2 years ago. We came out for the one underground strength thing, and everybody was straight bar squatting, and I knew I shouldn't be straight bar squatting that day, but everybody else was doing it, so I'm like, well, whatever. On my last set, I partially tore my rotator cuff. When I went to push on the bar, I heard it kind of crunching. But so for the rest of that summer, I went back and trained and used that bar, and that's the only bar I used on any of my speed work. And then I kind of, on heavy days, I would rotate a partial and a full range movement. And I was actually able to get through meet training. My bench was not good at the meet, but the rest of my rotator cuff held on. I benched the hardest 600-pound bench I ever did. It was a complete grinder. But that bar helped quite a bit. I like the rackable camber bar for benching. It's tough. It's just like when you squat with it. So a lot of people, when they press, they like to throw the bar back over their face. So just like if you squat with that bar, if you rock forward off the box, it's going to sway and kick your ass. You kind of get the same thing. Mm-hmm. So if you're a bencher who throws the bar back over your face, it'll teach you to press in a straight line. So that's a good bar. It's hard. Like you said, you can't doing the speed work with that is tough. It's not a good idea. I usually now
if if you ground it, if you put chains on it,
yeah,
then it takes the sway away. Then you could do it,
right? But
you're negating some of the purpose of the bar,
right?
Yeah,
you could do that.
Yeah, I mean, you can see if you can tell when I'm cheating when I use the spider bar, because if you ever see a chain hanging on it, I'm fucking cheating. The warm-ups didn't feel good because the chain keeps that fucking thing from swinging. You know what I'm saying? It grounds it to the ground. Hey. There's a little secret.
That's funny. Yeah. But yeah, those two bars are, like, as far as specialty bars go, fat bar's good every once in a while.
Yeah, fat bar's good. I forgot that one.
I'm looking at the wall over there. I don't like benching with a Buffalo or Duffalo style bar. That does not feel good for whatever reason. A lot of the guys I train with like that, but I'm not a fan of doing that one. And then whenever I bench, I usually will put bands or chains on, just to kind of get that load off the bottom part of the press. I'll try to build that part of the press with my speed days and my dumbbell work, where it's a little more controlled and not so heavy in the bottom.
Speaking of equipment, what is one piece of equipment or a bar that would be the best addition to a commercial gym, assuming they have only the basics, rack, crap benches, cheap barbells, etc.?
This is a SS yoke bar. I think that's
what I figured.
To me, that's the number one bar. They should be the first thing, after a straight bar. should be the first bar that they get if they're training their lower body. You know, it does have upper body applications, but if they're training their lower body, it's just, you know, you're going to have people in a commercial gym that can't squat because of shoulders. There's going to be, so it serves the purpose of the members more practically than any other bar.
What about other than bars?
What do you mean?
It just said one piece of equipment, so glute ham or
commercial gym?
Yeah.
Well, that fucking rack. I mean, most
no, other than the rack and bench and dumbbells.
Okay. I mean, most commercial gyms are going to have your basic shit.
A rack that you can go wider than the rack in would be nice.
Yeah.
You know.
I would probably say it depends upon the needs of what their membership is. I mean, if you're trying to build athletes and you're trying to build, you know, powerlifters, and a glute ham raise is like a no-brainer to me, you know, because you got to build the posterior chain, plus you got the back work that you can do on there. There's tons of things that you can do on a glute ham raise for your posterior chain that, you know, can't be duplicated or replicated, and the only way it can be even closely replicated is doing a manual hamstring curl, and that's not a glute ham, because your knee's not. I wish people would fucking understand this, you know, because you're you know what I'm saying, you're only moving from one joint. You know, a manual leg curl, it's a hard exercise, but you're not flexing from, you know, origin and insertion at the same time, which you do when you run, jump, and so forth. It's a hard fucking thing to do. You know, it's the inverse leg curl is a great fucking machine, but the knee's not dropping. You know, it's the difference between that and a glute ham raise. But glute ham raises, if you're on the right angle pad, like what we have, are hard. You know, so, you know, things like the inverse curl are a great way to prep people to be able to do a glute ham raise they can't typically do one. Yeah. Especially on ours, because it's going to be harder to do. But again, this is a commercial gym. You know, so what needs are they trying to service? So I'd have to know more information.
I'll always get people ask, should I get GHR or reverse hyper? And I usually say, unless you have back issues where reverse hyper is going to help you stay in the game type situation, go with GHR, because like you said, there's so much you can do on it. You can do back raise, GHR, turn around, do abs on it, sit-ups on it, abs with a band and standing, and you know, you can use it for a preacher curl bench too.
Yeah, I mean, if it's a sport training center or a powerlifting gym or something like that, both should be in the arsenal. I mean, it should not even be. It shouldn't be a fucking question. It's like you cover the basic, that's your basic needs. You know, you got the rack, and then those two things are going to be in there. Those are fucking basic fundamental needs. Yeah. And a lat pull. I mean, you got to have some kind of cable pulley type thing. Then from there, you know, everything else becomes, okay, now what can we afford? You know, but those are staples.
Okay. Benefits of training it for endurance athletes and female athletes.
Strength training?
Just says training.
Yeah, this is I ghost wrote this one in for a coach friend of mine. This could go under stuff sport coaches say.
Let's hear it.
I mean, and I've kind of bashed research in the past a little bit, you know, but there's actually research on this, and somebody said this a couple weeks ago, and I thought it was awesome. They said even endurance is a show of strength in some way or form. So the stronger you are, the easier anything will be. You have to bring the conditioning side up to be an endurance athlete, obviously, but anything you can do to make yourself stronger is going to make whatever you are doing easier. They're still applying force. Yeah, it's for a longer time. You know, I can't tell you how many female athletes I've seen over the years who their bodies get absolutely trashed because, one, they don't eat enough. That's just most young people, right? But then you get a distance coach who puts tons and tons of mileage on these kids. So these kids they're basically at the point where they have to have some form of strength training just to survive their sport, rather than help improve their performance. They get so beat down. People don't understand how taxing to the body running is. You know, it's like leftover from the 50s and 60s. We think that's how we get in shape. Well, it's pretty tough. And then if you're not training or eating or sleeping right to kind of combat those things, why do we have female distance runners with the highest injury rate in an athletic department? You know, because they're weak, and then they go pound the shit out of themselves all week. If you help them get stronger, you would not have that. And, you know, they might actually get better at their sport.
Yeah, I mean, there's two concepts coaches and athletes need to understand. One is anaerobic capacity. The other is aerobic capacity. Both of those are required for you to be able to train and recover. So to start on the opposite end of the discussion, for a strength athlete to be able to recover and to make it through a meet, they have to have an aerobic capacity. That doesn't mean you need to be sprinting and running 5Ks. What it does mean is if on a scale of 1 to 10, a power lifter needs to have an aerobic capacity of a 4, where a long distance runner needs it to be a 10. You need it to be a 4. You're fine as long as it's a 5 or a 6. If it falls to a 3, you're not recovering, you're going to get fucking hurt. Yeah. Okay, what do you do to build that? Well, that's where the GPP comes in. That's where, you know, the heavier you get, the lower that aerobic capacity goes. Not really because of your body weight, but because you're moving less and you don't even know it. So Paul Childress used to just walk 10 minutes on a treadmill a few times a week. All right, and that's how he was able to maintain his aerobic capacity, which doesn't have to be more than a 4, but it has to be the 4 to help recover. Falls lower, you're fucked. Now, that also goes with anaerobic capacity. So all strength is based upon absolute strength or maximal strength. And that has to be developed. And I've learned over the years, even coming back from major surgeries and major illness, the first thing I bring back in my training is my anaerobic capacity. I bring back my absolute strength, which sounds ass backwards, but I bring that back first, because when I bring that back, then my ability to be able to ride a bike for 20 minutes is automatically there. My ability to walk on the trail for 10 or 15 minutes is automatically there. I don't have to train to be able to do that, because when my anaerobic capacity is to a point to where I can train it. You can do heavy singles and stuff like that, because you got to train to be able to do that. You just can't throw people into, you know, doing heavy singles. You got to train the technique, you got to train the form, you got to make sure you're not going to tear a groin off, all the other kind of stuff. And it's 8-week period, 10-week period time, whatever it's going to be. Once you get that, then it's so much easier to start doing the auxiliary work, the supplemental work. Everything else falls into place. If you do all that shit first, and then you try to throw in the absolute strength, your recovery is a fucking disaster. It's a mess. I've tried it both ways numerous times, coming back from 0. And when I mean 0, not being able to bench the fucking bar with a dime on it. 0. All right? And nothing works better than it's frustrating because you're weak as fuck. But building that absolute strength first carries along. It's like a fishing net pulling through water, man. It just carries along all these other little small fish that when you go to pull it in, it's like, holy fuck. You know, compared to just throwing a fucking lure out and maybe catching one fish. But you got to throw the other stuff out there. And I've worked with aerobic athletes when I was still training people, cyclists, hobbyists, you know, long distance cyclists, and, you know, fucking ride all weekends, you know, not ultra marathoners, but, you know, marathoners as well. And the whole winter, you know, when they would just be doing their basic shit on the treadmill, when that was controlled, it's building absolute strength. And with aerobic athlete, novice or intermediate, because I never worked with advanced aerobic athletes, they can maintain their absolute strength for about 8 weeks.
Okay.
After that, it dips. Where what I've seen with just normal athletes in general, or power lifters in general, is you can pull dynamic work out, like speed work, and they can maintain that for about 3 weeks before you're going to see a dip. But then you can have them do box jumps just on 1 week, and they can maintain it for another 2. So there's ways to make, this is more block oriented type shit. Where if I know that I can build them up to their max capacity on big core lifts that they enjoy, because it really doesn't matter what the lifts are.
Yeah,
they're
right.
runners, right? So if it's a high box or a Zercher squat, or I didn't give a fuck. They pick whatever they like that hits the whole body. I can build that up to a PR, and then that's right before their season starts, and their season's going to run for about 8 weeks. I can pull the shit completely out and then go more into circuit training, which
Right.
are circuits of 15 minutes, 20 minutes, and so forth, which can target more of where they're telling me they're getting sore
Right.
from the riding, to be able to develop that. And there's really no need, there's no need for dynamic work.
Right.
That was kind of what got pulled out. And then they do their sport,
Yep.
and you gotta worry about, knee stabilization, calf work. This is where stretching and shit comes in too, because ankles get tight, calves get tight, certain things get tight, that you gotta know their baseline before they start the heavy pounding.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Where if they're, range of motion on their ankle gets compromised, I have to bring it back to baseline, because I know now we're getting close to, shin splints, plantar fasciitis. Something's going to happen because this is getting out of range. And then that's where that time was kind of spent there. But to think that absolute strength doesn't have a component in this is ignorance, and it's biggest, because there is tons of research on this.
Yeah.
Going way back. Now, the problem is you get the meatheads, that think that they need to be doing heavy strength work during their whole season, and that's
Right.
not the case, because going back to, block training, Bumpa and, Ursuline and all that kind of stuff, how long can this component be maintained? You know what I'm saying? Without
Right.
training it. And those are things that are very specific to the athlete, but it's not that far off.
Right.
You know,
yeah,
it's
you can adjust the group and take
I
care
mean,
of most people.
Muscle hypertrophy generally lasts longer than what people think it does, especially if there's other training going on. So I'd say that lasts kind of the longest. Strength. Now, if you're talking peaking strength, competitive strength, no, that's not going to, that lasts 1 day.
Right.
If you're lucky, you hit it on that 1 day. But that training max, that can be maintained, for a while, especially if you're an aerobic athlete, because they're not going to be that strong.
Yeah. It's it's funny. I just if strength isn't important in endurance sports, why is the longest endurance sport in the world the dirtiest with the most steroids in it? The fucking cycling.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's
Right?
that actually,
Because strength matters.
yeah, I mean, God, I read not too long ago, or somebody pointed out or said that the Tour de France cannot be done drug free.
I believe it.
That it can't be done drug free. So, I don't know who said it. I don't know how legitimate it was, but I heard it. I'm like, fucking makes sense to me.
What do they go for? Like, is it like a month straight or something?
I don't know. I don't pay that much attention.
I mean, yeah.
What we got?
All right. If you struggle to control the eccentric portion of the bench press on a higher percentage lift, would that be a weak lat and bicep issue? Or any thoughts on that?
My first thought is you're not setting the bar correctly to start. So you're getting a lift off. Something's wrong with your setup. So it's kind of hard, without seeing the person bench, to be able to find a weak point. But I'm pretty certain that the person's not packing their back. They're not, driving, using the leg drive to drive down into the bench. And when they're pulling the bar out or getting the bar lifted out to them, they're not letting the bar settle into, they're not letting the shoulder settle into the joint capsule and the joint capsule settle into the shoulder blades and the shoulder blades settle into the pad. You know, it's the heavier the weight, the stronger the benchers. Watch them. You'll see what I'm talking about. They'll hold it there and the bar kind of settles all in. When that settles all in and then you break the elbows to lower the bar is being absorbed not just through your arms, but through your entire body. If none of that's tight and it's all opened up, as I see with most people, as soon as you bend your elbows, everything's being absorbed basically by your arms. And so the eccentric's going to be a bitch because you're trying to lower, everything just with your arms. So that would be my answer.
I think you probably just answered it for 90% of people. It's a technique thing. Get with somebody who's a good bencher, knows what they're talking about, and have them check you out.
I mean, across the board, you're eccentrically going to be stronger 20, at the worst, 10% more, greatest 30 to 40% more. Eccentrically, then you're going to be on the concentric. And I'm not telling you to go fucking put 140% on and lower it to your chest. I'm not saying that. That's a good way to tear a pec off. But typically that's what you're going to see, is you're going to be stronger eccentrically. So if that's the problem and it feels like it's falling down on you, then your form is crap, something's not right with that, or B, there's some nerve damage which is going on, something's not working correctly, which would have been stated, like my shoulder something would have been happening there. But usually I find it being a lack of tightness. Tightness solves all eccentric problems on all lifts.
Okay. What do you see or worry about coaches getting wrong when applying conjugate principles to their team's lifting?
I'd probably go back to the technique thing. And that goes in like to the coaches themselves. Like they're worried about, that's a big thing. I get a lot of questions about what percentage should I use. You know what I mean? They get wrapped up in, should I be 30%? Should it be 50%? Make sure your kids, if I can say two best pieces of advice for even any coach, make sure your kids are lifting correctly. And a lot of times what we think is correct might not be correct. And once they have the technique down, make sure they have the right intent into the bar. Like if you can teach a kid to kind of smash, you know what I mean? Like try to kill the fucking bar when they lift, that's going to go a long way, because the hypertrophy stuff is going to take care of itself because everybody knows how to do that. Every coach is going to put a bunch of volume on a kid and make him do work, and that part's going to take care of themselves. If you can teach a kid to accelerate weight, I think that will put you ahead of a lot of people. And once you get those things down, then start going to the outside factors. And going back to the technique thing, like what you think is right might not be right. It's weird to me that I kind of feel like in sports, we it's cool to go to seek out this sprint coach, or cool to seek, Dan Paff's the big thing in track right now. So I want to make my kids fast, so I'm going to go to the top sprint coach. Years ago everybody was referencing Charlie and stuff, Charlie Francis. So it's okay for a strength coach to go and pull from people who know how to make people fast. Why is it bad to go to power lifters to help our kids lifting? It's almost like you're not going to turn them into power lifters, but you might, if you go find someone who's been lifting competitively for 20 years and not had any major surgeries, that's the dude you should go talk to figure out how to get your kids strong and keep them safe. They won't turn into a power lifter. Trust me.
Yeah.
You might have one or two that lift after school, but you know what I mean? It's like, or we'll even, there was a time when strongman was popular. So you're seeing all these programs. Oh, now I'm going to do strongman because I want my kids to be like that. Most of those guys didn't get like that doing that. Most of them just lifted weights, and then they got into, you know what I mean? Then they got into strongman and started doing that. But then we see we see those things and it's, oh, that's functional or whatever, but, you know. So it's okay to steal from strongman, it's okay to steal from sprinting, but don't steal from powerlifting to train athletes. It's bad.
Yeah. I would guess the thing that I see that I think is a mistake wise from coaches with Conjugate is far too many variations of the movement, where these kids have less than 3 years training experience, normally less than a year or two when they're getting them, and they have them doing good morning squats with chains to a box, with a baseball hat on backwards, or some shit, and then the next week they're doing, there's too many variants where just stick to like a close stance, low box squat, some type of pull if it's off pins, even if it's a hex bar, even though I fucking hate it, and some type of, I still like a good morning. You can teach that as a banded movement only, standing on the bands around the traps, to be able to teach that and teach them how to squat properly, how to do a good morning properly, how to pull properly, how to do a row properly, and, just pick no more than 10 total movements that you're going to use for your program and keep them in there, because these kids have neural adaptations they're going to make, and then they have muscular adaptations they're going to make, and then they have, more coordinational they're going to make progress on several fronts, just from, them learning how to do the skill of the movement is going to make them stronger. Them actually getting physically bigger is going to make them stronger. Them learning how to be more efficient doing the movement is going to make them stronger. And not one of those three really focused on any type of periodization. All three of those just focused on doing the movement correctly. And that's where I think they're fucking things up, is if you take the basic movements, be it a barbell row, the movements that all the accessories branch off of, there's not that many.
Right.
There's an overhead press, there's a vertical press, there's a vertical pull, there's a squat, there's a deadlift, there's not that much shit. Teach those things at the basic elementary level that they can do. Like if they can't barbell squat, then goblet squat or dumbbell squat or whatever they need to do to be able to do that, until they do it almost perfectly.
Right.
So 90% efficiency. Just doing that, you won't believe how much stronger they're going to get. They're going to put 100 pounds on every lift just by doing that. But I think they're fucking that whole process up, because every week they're changing shit. So 1 week it's a board press, 1 week it's a floor press, 1 week it's this, 1 week it's this. And it's all variants of the bench press. Right. I understand that. Trust me, I'm biased towards this in a major fucking way, but I'm not stupid either. You still got to learn how to fucking bench. You can't do a board press unless you know how to fucking bench press right. You can't do a floor press unless you know how to fucking bench press right. And they're weak.
Yeah.
So if they're very weak, the load that they're lifting isn't really displaying the strength that they really have. Kind of like I talked about earlier, that you can put 100 pounds on a high school kid squat just with technique alone. He always had the strength. He just couldn't display it. So why not use that strength deficit of when he sucks to just pound him with volume to teach him how to do it right?
Right.
Because when he gets stronger, he's not going to be not going to be able to recover as well, because now you're starting to pull in, the muscle firing and recovery, all that other shit gets pulled into play beyond coordination. You can train basic coordination fucking all day long. Just think about a balance beam. You walk upon a balance beam 100 times a day, you're going to be sore the next day.
Right.
All right. Well, learning how to squat is kind of the same concept as learning how to walk on a balance beam. You got to be able to support and balance the weight and know how to do that. Now, if it's with a bar and it's, you could do hundreds of reps. I'm not telling you to do this.
Right.
But that's where I think coaches fuck up, especially when they're dealing with absolute novices. kids that have never trained before. And it's doing the kids a terrible disservice. And then it's doing a terrible disservice to the kids' next strength coach if they actually are a really skilled athlete. Because then they end up going to a D1 school or a D2 school or a D3 school, and the coach wants to puke. It's like, this kid's on a full ride, and what the fuck? You know what I'm saying? He can't even fucking bench right.
Yeah.
And athletes are tough when it comes to a bench because they're long-armed specimens. So it takes a little bit more work to be able to really get their bench down, and their egos. They're competitive as fuck, and they have egos, and they have long arms, so it's just shoulder injuries waiting to happen.
Yeah.
So communication's a big aspect with that too. I think coaches fuck that up. Where you can have the kids and tell them, here's what we're doing, and it's going to make you stronger, da 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 da, and then they're going to go to the rec center and max out with their buddies on the bench.
Yep.
All right, because they want to know how much they can bench, because you're not letting them do it. So you gotta find some kind of way to barter and trade. Like, you do this for 3 weeks, we'll let you max out on a 2 board.
Yeah. Yep.
Some shit like that they'll buy into, so they don't go fuck themselves up at the rec center.
Yeah.
Which,
seen that before.
Yeah, every coach has. And when I hear it from every coach, it's like, okay, how could that been avoided? And they all realize, fuck, I could have avoided that. Not with all. I mean, some kids are just numbnuts, but so you can't fix that. Usually they're your best players too.
Yeah.
Crazy fucks.
All right. What would be your advice for pursuing a career in strength coaching? What hurdles are faced in that career, and how did you overcome them?
Don't do it. No, I'm joking. I tell everyone this. I used to tell our intern, make sure that's what you want to do. Because it's going to be tough. There are so many people that want to be strength coaches. Think about that. We got about 100 or 120 Division I schools in the country. Everybody wants to be a Division I strength coach. Let's be generous and say there's 10 at each one of those. So what's that, 1,000 or 1,200 jobs in the country? How many, kids coming out of college want to be a D1 strength coach? So make sure it's what you want to do. It's going to be hard. You're going to have to work for free. You're going to have to work for shit pay probably. Just, be ready. Make sure you want to do it, because it's going to be tough. But it's worth it. You know what I mean? If it's that's why I tell people, make sure you want to do it, because it's worth it. It's tough, and I dealt with a lot of shit, but everything was worth it. I can't remember what I was watching. There was a video I was watching, and when I was fired, I've been pretty pissed off about being fired. I'm competitive. That's the way I'm wired. And I was watching somebody, like an old training video, and I was like, you know what? If I didn't get that job, there's so many things that I wouldn't have got to do, or experiences I wouldn't have had I not done that. And it kind of helped me just calm down a little bit. I was like, there's a shitload of cool stuff I got to do. The pay is not always great. You're working long ass hours and it's hard, but it's worth it. And I think most people that are in it for those reasons. You know what I mean? So the advice I would give is make sure that's what you want to do, and just be ready, be determined, and don't be easily deterred, because you're gonna have to fight through some stuff.
Yeah, I didn't go that path, and I realized that very fast. It took me half an internship, to realize
I had those kids, a few of them.
Yeah, that I'm not doing this, and wanted to go a different route. But I've been around strength coaches ever since 90, in one capacity or another, hundreds, so I've seen what qualities exist in those that get the jobs that they want and those that don't. And it's pretty simple, but it's a lot of what you said. But you need to understand what you're getting yourself into. And I don't think people talk to enough coaches out of school that have been around for a long time. You need to talk to coaches that are retired You need to talk to coaches that are still coaching. And you need to talk to, coaches that just started coaching. And because it's a fight, it's more of a fight than you trying to make a starting position on any sport team that you've been on. It's a longer fight, and you have to be in it because, I don't want to say because you love it, but you have to be in it because you really want to fucking do it. Because here's the thing, you have to be willing to do what everybody else isn't. And when he's said there's like 1,200 jobs, well, there's probably 100 or 200,000 people who want those jobs. So you have to be willing to do what those other ones won't. And that's why the profession in large part is so underpaid, is because fuck it, you don't want to do it. There's somebody who's willing to actually sleep in their car to do your job, and will do that for 3 years and have no problem making half what you're making. So are you willing to fucking sleep in your car to make that job, to do that job? Those are the things that you need to think about, because is your work ethic strong enough to outwork, 150,000 other people, and not just pounding your chest saying, fuck yeah, you need to think about that. 150,000 other people, and I'll guarantee there's going to be at least 20,000 of them that are fucking outright nuts, willing to do whatever it fucking takes to be able to get the position that they want. Are you one of those people? All right. And that changes. This is the other thing I don't think about. You may be that person coming out of school with no real responsibility. Are you cool not assuming any responsibility for the next 30 fucking years until you can get into a position that actually pays well? Or, have you been with the same girl for 5 or 6 years and you're thinking about getting married, and you don't want to move around? I mean, there's a lot of factors that go into play here, that having a family can be a negative or it can be a positive. But, your partner needs to know what ride they're getting on. Because they're going to be the one that's going to be footing the bills, and they're going to be the one that's going to have to find a new job every time that you get fired. So I guess what I'm saying is, I'm not trying to deter anybody, in any way. If this is what you really want to do, then go after and do it. But you got to understand it's going to take 100% and know what that 100% means. And also keep in mind that if you think, being an entrepreneur or setting up your own business is going to be easier, it's not. The failure rate's higher. Okay. Right. So if you want to play it safe, you got to determine, well, what is playing it safe, and what is the safest, most stable thing. So you got to determine your degree of risk that you're willing to live your life at, with, a wife, kids, and so forth. Not only where you are today, but where you're going to be 20 years from now. And if that's not in your DNA, to be able to want to have that high risk for that long period of time, that's okay. Don't do it. Go work at a sport training center. They're popping up all the fucking place, all the time. And then learn how to be the best fucking coach they have. So you're indispensable. All right. Then go from there. Or you might find that you just love fucking training people, or the consulting aspect, or a sales aspect. There's so many branches that can come off of that basic tree, that if you have your background in that, and that's what it's in, that doesn't just limit you to being a strength and conditioning coach. The skill sets are, you have communication skill sets, you have coaching skill sets, you have all kinds of skill sets that can apply to the same industry, just in different ways. I mean, you're doing it now, so, and it can be in the educational way, it can be in a sales way, it can be in a combination of those two ways. So there's always a path. You just can't get frustrated and not think that there is. Because then you're looking down instead of up, and the opportunity may be right in front of your face and you don't see it.
There's a lot you can do with it. Like I had, I remember back, I had one intern. He asked if he could sit in a meeting with a sport coach, and they came into my office, and the coach was cool with it or whatever. So he sat through the meeting, and as soon as the coach left, he goes, I don't know how in the hell you do this. And he's out of the profession, you know what I mean? But it's like you said, make sure you know what you want to do. Like I started training when I was 12, and pretty much like when that started, all my other interests besides the sports I was playing, like no more guitar, no, you know what I mean? Any other hobbies were second fiddle. My dad kind of saw that. Probably a couple years in, he was like, you know, there's people who are strength coaches, and he kind of told me what it was about, working with athletes and stuff and making them stronger. It was pretty much when I was 14, I was like, yeah, that's what I'm doing. You know what I mean? So then like when I get interns and stuff that would come in and they're like, well, I think it'd be really cool to work with athletes. I'm like, okay, you know,
there's no chance.
That's when I don't tell them don't, but it's like, you know, you might be able to go private sector and make a lot more money and have more time on your hands, or, you know, whatever. But you can kind of tell who's going to make it and who's not, you know.
And that can change. You know, like I said, I know a lot of coaches that do it for 10, 15 years and say, you know, I can't do this anymore because it's a lot of hours, man.
It does change. It does. That's a great point. I had a kind of towards the end, I had a meeting with a coach, and like we had just had I had like a year as a strength coach that most people like you could retire on. And then I went in my next meeting with my immediate supervisor. I walked out of the meeting, and for the first time since I was 14 years old, I went in my office and I was like, do I really want to do this? You know what I mean? Just based on the feedback and stuff that I got, I was like, damn, you know what I mean? And it's kind of funny. So when that was over, I was talking to our old wrestling coach. And this was probably a few months before I got on board here. He said, listen, you're one of the best coaches we ever had as a strength coach, but keep your options open. And he mentioned one of his former wrestlers who actually went into equipment sales, and he's like, so-and-so's doing this and he loves it. He said, so, you know, I understand you're a coach or whatever, but keep your mind open. So it's kind of looking back, it's kind of funny that he mentioned that, and then a few months later, you know, things kind of ended up the way they did, which I'm super grateful.
That's what I'm saying,
and,
is that took it from, you know, having your head down to having the head up, because opportunities abound, right?
Yes.
It's just if your head's down, you don't see it. And I think that's where most people become frustrated, because they get so pissed off, frustrated, and their head's down. They don't see, you know, it's always there. Yeah. But if you're not looking, it's just not going to happen.
Yep.
Nate, can you tell the scoreboard story? Whatever that is.
So a couple weeks ago, I was doing Instagram Live with Russin, and we were talking about research. We were trying to pimp out the box squat or whatever, you know what I mean? We were talking about it or whatever, and obviously we're biased, like you said. And he was mentioning there's not research to back it up or something like that. And I said, the scoreboard, your research, you know what I mean? And where that comes from is, so even when like we talked about your kids that kick ass in the weight room and stuff, when you're coaching, we had a few of those, and they would, you know, they knew we were doing things differently than a lot of strength coaches do it, or a lot of programs do. And they would come back, and there was this one kid who was getting flack from a sport coach about the way he was training. The kid was an All-American, by the way, multiple All-American. And he would like come to me and he's like, why is this guy giving me such a hard time? You know, and it wasn't his coach. It wasn't his direct sport coach. I should clarify that. He would come to my office. And he's like, I don't know what this guy's problem is. Like, we're kicking ass and his kids kind of aren't and whatever. And I'm like, dude, don't worry about it. Fucking scoreboard, right? So that kind of evolved, and, you know, I've always kind of used that, you know what I mean? Like, if you're winning and kicking ass, like, who cares? Who cares what other people say, you know what I mean?
Why, you don't.
Yeah.
You know,
like,
the person that's winning and kicking ass usually isn't too concerned about it.
Yeah.
You know, so.
That's kind of where that came from. And then, you know, later on when I transitioned, like, looking back, like, I did what I was supposed to do. You know what I mean? We won. We had less injuries. The program worked. Whatever.
All right. Best way to integrate Olympic lifts into a conjugate program if the coach insists on their athletes doing them.
I was going to say don't. I'm glad you threw that caveat in there. When we put it in, this is what I generally recommend. Put it in on your dynamic lower day. Just because in my mind, those are the traits with that movement that you're trying to train. So keep it on that way. We typically did it before our speed squats, just because typically the load being used on that is going to be less than the speed squat. So we almost kind of used it as, to use all the buzzwords, a neural primer. You know what I mean? And we had to, it wasn't something we did all the time, so there was more time spent coaching. So there's more of a learning curve there for the kids. So we would put it earlier in the workout. You know, speed squats they were good at for the most part. They had been doing that for a while, so they can go through with less coaching and do a better job. So we would typically go tissue work, roll out or whatever, general warm up, jumps, and then our Olympic variants, and then speed squat, and then the rest of the stuff. So it was once a week, usually, unless it was, you know, we were told to put it in there more. But that's usually where I have people put it. That seemed to work okay.
Okay. Should you let missing a max effort attempt stew in your head, or try your best to forget about it and move on, as far as your mentality goes for coming back the next time and lifting it?
You have to have both.
Well,
you know what I mean? Like,
I can tell you what you should do, but then it's not what I fucking do. I mean, what you should do is forget about it. You know, you leave the gym, it stays in the gym. But me, you know, I haven't missed a lift and fuck since Westside, and a few months ago I missed a fucking spider bar thing, and oh my god, I knew it was going to take 2 weeks for me to be ready to fucking do it again, because I was determined I was going to fucking do it again, and I missed it because of strength, which really pissed me off, because that's you know, you technically miss it. It's like, okay, I got an excuse. I missed this because I was fucking weak. That made me mad as fuck. Because now, actually, I knew it was going to take probably a month. It's like, fuck, I need to get faster. And this is just me talking, because this is my training, because it's reverse band shit. I'm like, I need to be faster off the fucking box so the bands can help me more. I'm fucking not even using the bands to its advantage because I'm popping too slow. So I need to do some fucking dynamic work. I was multiple times a day, every day for the next 3 weeks, I would get fucking mad about it. And I was mad about it every night before I went to bed. I'm fucking mad about it right now. And it's already over, and I've already beat it. And it still fucking makes me mad.
Are you mad, bro?
I fucking hate it. So the fucking moral of it is, don't get in the situation to where it happens. And when I was at Westside, I had those guys around me to keep me out of that situation, to make sure that didn't happen. It's like, you push the limits and you walk that fucking edge of the cliff, and your foot's going to slip off every now and again. And yeah, sometimes you're going to fall, but it should be rare. But man, for me, but I was smart enough to not come back and fucking try to do it that day. Right. You know what I'm saying? Like, I didn't repeat it. It's like, this was a fucking miss. This is because I suck. You know, I'm not strong enough. I need to fix it. What went wrong? And then I have to look at it. The speed wasn't there. My stability wasn't there. My torso tightness wasn't there. There was a lot of things I have control of fixing. I can fix these. How long is it going to take? Right. I need one dynamic cycle, a little bit of a deload. All right, so it's going to take 5 weeks until I can try it again. So we put it down in the 5 week. And then I do the work, and then come back and fucking kill it. And then just beat it by, 10 pounds per side, whatever it was. Just fucking kill it. Done. Monkey off my back. Let's move on to the next thing. Not let this happen again. And I still have bigger, there's always some objective that I have, but that kind of threw me off course. So if that's my advice, if you do it, don't try to repeat it, even though DeCenzio had a story where he tried to repeat something and he got it on the 14th time. Don't do it. All right. Unless it's a technical thing. Like, gear work is a totally different thing, but there's so few gear lifters, it's not worth talking about. But if you look at the video and it's a squat that you did and you really fucked it up, like you didn't brace, you went down and you were falling forward on the way down. If there's a reason, then yeah, you can go ahead and try. If it's really like, oh my God, I really fucked this up, then you can and should, be able to do it, because it will fuck your confidence up. And I'll do it with those out here that if they're a little higher, if they miss something that was just technically, I'll make them do it again, because I don't want them to walk out with that experience of I'm not strong enough, because that wasn't the case. Then again, step it back. Why did this happen? What do we need to do to fix it? They're all experiences and learning. So that's the answer there.
Okay. How might you use a sled to work around injuries or even as rehab?
Walk with it. No, it's a great tool. Talking about things that I maybe would have done differently, to use a little more sled work. There's so many things you can do with it. It's hard to kind of narrow it down, but like you can, if you can't squat, you can go do some heavy drags probably still without hurting or making your injury worse, by just plugging that into your max effort lane. And then you can probably go through and get through some sort of accessory work and work around the injury. You can, let's say you can do conditioning. Like if I have an upper body, I've been doing this myself. You can walk with a sled and do like shoulder rehab for 10, 15 minutes while you're walking with a sled. So if I'm an athlete coming back and I'm out of practice, I can still keep some conditioning and do rehab at the same time. You can kind of kill two birds with one stone. I mean, sleds are a great tool. That's something I was guilty of too. I didn't put it in at times because I wasn't sure how to put it in. You kind of overthink it. Just go do it. If you're gonna replace your max effort lane with sled drags, make it heavy sled drags, do 5-6 sets, build your volume up over time. If you're using it for conditioning, go lightweight, make sure the heart rate gets up. You know what I mean? I think people probably don't put it in because they're overthinking it. They think they're gonna screw it up. Like Nick Showman said this at a clinic. He said, just drag it. You know what I mean? Because it's more times than not will help you.
There's multiple ways to put it in there. When I was still competing, I was also training people, so kind of on my feet or on my ass, 10, sometimes 12 hours a day, depending upon the day. So I had sled work in. I trained at Westside Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday at the time, so the sled work was in there on Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday for recovery and restoration, which was easy for me to do between clients if I had somebody cancel. And most of the sled work that I did was concentric only. So I did just the normal walking, forward, backwards, that kind of stuff. And that was more just a warm up for the sled work. And then front raises from my shoulders, because it's concentric. And then obviously when you lower your arms, the sled stops. So you just got concentric only. So it's just pumping the muscle full of blood without any eccentric loading, so you're not really tearing the muscle down a lot. You're just infusing it with a ton of blood. So the front raises, rear raises, so I even did external rotators, just back and forth for 20 or 30 minutes. Nothing that was super exhausting. It sucked when it was hot as fuck outside because I was 290, so I'd have to change and all this other kind of bullshit just to be able to go out and do something for 20 minutes. But I had to do it because I wasn't getting the recovery that I needed, and I had to be very, very meticulous on the recovery protocols that I used and how I rotated them in, because my work schedule was what it was. Fortunately, at the time, I had Mel Siff, who was able to help talk me through how to set up different recovery restoration cycles, so I never really adapted to them. So I did use the sled a lot, but it wasn't always used. There was times that it would break from the sled and be soft tissue work, or, just light machine training, which I had in the club as well. But now that I don't have to try to fit in 4 training days in a 7-day week, I don't need to do this shit because I train less. So I'm getting my recovery because I just train less frequently. I don't have a fucking meet, so I have nothing that I'm really training for. except a certain number on my head on a couple different exercises that I want to happen before the end of the year. So I have determined goals and that are out there, but it's not on a certain exact time that has to happen, because I have to be recovered. I'm too fucked up to do shit that I'm not recovered. So I may have some months where I only train 4 times a month. Some months I might train 6. There's been some months it's been 3. People are like, oh my God, you're only training 3 times a month. Look, that's all the fuck I could recover from, with what I'm doing. So that's, now if I threw in restoration methods and all this other shit, I could do more, but I don't give a fuck, because my goal isn't going to change. It's still the same, and it has to happen before the end of the year. So these aren't going to help me get to my goal any faster, because I'm not changing my timetable.
Yeah.
I'm being realistic with what that is. So a competitive athlete compared to a recreational athlete are 2 different worlds. I can say I'm not fucking training tonight. I don't feel good. My neck's jacked. I'm not fucking training. I won't train. I'll help other people, or, just that route. So I'm trying to speak to 2 different audiences here.
Yeah,
if it's a competitive power lifter, you have to get ready for the meet. You got to do the meet. The pulling out of the meet should not, for me, it was never an option. Here's the meet, here's the date, I'm fucking doing it. If I got to crawl there, I'm crawling there. There was never a fucking option. I can be sore, I can be hurt, I can all that bullshit, I can do that on other days. That one day, I got to be there. Even if I'm going to bench 135, I got to be there. I can cry and be a bitch on different days. You know what I'm saying? Not that day. Now it doesn't matter. That's the difference between a power lifter and somebody that trains the power lifts. You know what I'm saying? I have way more options. Yeah. It's like, I don't want to fucking squat. Okay. If I'm not, I'll do it next week. I'll just do the fucking good morning stuff.
I may be looking into my future. How hard was it for you to go from the competitive to where your mind is at now?
Really hard.
Yeah.
It was, well, there's 2 different things. There's, I had with the Justin thing, I had an identity crisis, because it's all I did since I was 13 years old, so from 83 to 2005, that's all that was my number 1 priority. Now it's gone. All right. So that was hard, but it could have been harder, because at that time was also like, I've been doing this business thing now for like 5 years and it's going really nowhere. And now I can really have the time to focus on trying to actually do something with this. So I had something to segue into that I was kind of excited about.
Right.
I'm like, so that helped a lot, because it's like, okay, now this is what I'm going to do. Now, as I get older, and you don't know the price that you pay, right, until you get older. And Buddy told me a long time ago, wait till you're 50. The fucker was right. Then you start realizing, that, maybe, because I used to say, man, I'm so happy that I got out of the sport and it's just a fucking pec and a shoulder. No lower body shit. I'm so fucking happy that there's because everybody else had like knees and all kinds of other shit, no quad tears. It's like I got out unscathed. My lower body is a fucking tank. I got 2 hip fucking replacements. So you don't know the damage. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like you don't know the accumulative wear and tear until 10 years after the shit. So now it's, each year something else fucks up. It's a matter of, as I said, kind of my post there the other day, it's like every doctor appointment I go to, there's another thing I can't do. So for everything I can't do, I got to come up with 3 things that I can, that way I don't end up going down that tunnel of fuck, and, that's kind of, so it gets harder, but you just pivot, and I know for a fact there's going to come a time where I know it's probably already come, where the healthiest thing I could do is not train at all. I know that for a fact. It's been told to me and people will argue until I tell them all the issues I deal with, and then they shut the fuck up. So That's the healthiest thing. So I got to figure out, what can I do to not make things worse, and that's the key. And I did that with my shoulder, 2004 it needed replaced and it's still not replaced. So I can do it with all this other shit. Okay. It just takes finding the right people and having the right discussions and being open-minded enough. And it's a fucked up landscape to move through because not a lot of people have done it. Right? Bodybuilders typically will downsize and get healthier. Powerlifters typically just do drugs and get fat. So there's not like a lot in front of you to kind of show you, here's how to navigate this. Yeah. And I think powerlifters get more beat up than bodybuilders because they're doing more of the same movement patterns repeated over and over and over and over, where bodybuilders are in different movement patterns and different intensity zones and so forth. So it's just part of the price that you pay. Yeah. No different than a football player or anybody else. So you have to fight the same battles that they do, but the problem is they walk away from the field. It's not like they're going to go back on the field. They may want to.
They don't have the option.
Yeah, they may want to, but they can't. Yeah. So we just got to find different ways to train and different ways to navigate it and find. I think the big thing to answer what you're asking, find something else that you're just as passionate about.
Find a new fix.
Yeah. And something else that you're just as passionate about. And then that passion will grow more and then kind of go from there. One of the coolest things that I just saw this yesterday is there was an interview with Kobe Bryant by, what's that dude's name? Patrick something David. I guess you could go on YouTube and search Patrick David Kobe Bryant. Okay. And the whole interview was really fucking good, but he had a couple of things that he said in there. I was like, wow, that's fucking cool. And one of them was he was trying to ask him, how come when you retired, you were just like, all right. I was like completely cool with it. Yeah. No, none of the, and Kobe was saying, everybody was telling him, man, get ready. It's like going through the stages of grief. And I'd say the same thing to any lifter. And he's like, he never had that because his next phase of life was already set up. He was looking forward to it.
Right.
It's like, this is done. My next 20 years are going to be better than my last. This is, he was driven like, fuck, I'm ready for this. Yeah. So he never had that, little part in there. The other part in the interview that I thought was really fucking cool that kind of hit home in a negative way is, in a big fucking negative way, is he was asked if he ever had to play a game on like little or no sleep or something like that. And he was talking about how, when his kids are little, they don't know. They don't understand, that you're tired or your back hurts and, that you had 5 away games and all this other stuff. And, you come home and you're really tired and you're beat up and your kids want to, wrestle on the floor, jump on your back. He says, they don't know the difference, so you get down there and do it. Yeah. And then here's what he said. Is like, fuck. It's like, if it was a game, you'd get back in there, wouldn't you? You know what I'm saying? No matter how fucking tired you were, if it was a game, you're fucking screaming at the coach, put me back in.
Yeah.
You would not make any fucking excuse.
That goes through my head a lot. Like, it could be something as simple as, I feel like shit, I don't want to drive to the grocery store and pick these, but then you're like, if it was time to go train, I would go do it.
Yeah, exactly. So it's the same thing.
Shit, here we go.
Yeah, it's the same thing. It's just twisting that. It was a cool interview, but it was real interesting to see that here you're taking this, one of the best, probably one of the top 5 of all time, and just fucking no problem. Just right on to the next phase of his life, which he's kicking ass at. So, very interesting. Because normally I deal with lifters that's like, oh man, and I went through it, I was like, this sucks.
Yeah.
Like, fuck.
I think a lot of our college athletes, I know I did when I was done with football. Holy shit. Like, I'm glad that I like training as much as I do and did, because it definitely helped with that. But like looking back, I was not, it was not a healthy thing.
I think the goal of, mentors, and I can't really say coaches, right? I have to say mentors here, because the goal of the coach is to win. Yeah. All right. They don't give a fuck about the athlete once they leave. All right. That's That's the reality, right? The goal of the mentors that are helping, these athletes is to make sure that they are prepared, that they have something that they're looking forward to. Like, man, and it's just not fishing and, retirement and all this other shit. It's like, what do you really want to do? What do you really love that you've had to put on hold for 20 years? Because I put a lot of shit on hold,
Right.
For 20 years. Fortunately for me, the business was kind of one of the things that was on hold for 5 years. And then it was like, okay, let's see what we can do now. And at the time I had, Jim in place and Tracy. So there was 3 of us. All right. No, I mean, there's still not a ton, but there's at least enough that, okay, let's see what we can do. Let's see if we can actually make something of this to where, we can all like get a paycheck, do something. And so that helped. If that wasn't there with my mentality, it would have been way worse. Way worse.
To end it here, I was thinking, Nate, you got a funny little series on Instagram called Shit Sport Coaches Say. I was wondering if you could explain that briefly and then maybe say some of the funnier ones or add some new ones.
Oh, man.
And then while Nate's doing that, Dave, if you want to think of shit online coaches say.
They're all stupid.
That's the idea.
Well, basically, I don't know. I was doing the war wagon thing, and then just answering questions like while I was driving to the gym or whatever, to kind of help get myself some content. And honestly, one of the reasons I started doing that was when I first started here, you guys mentioned like, so sometime you'll come down and we'll make some videos and stuff, and I'm like, that's gonna be really fucking weird talking in front of a camera. Like, it was just, to me, was, so I'm like, all right, I'll see if people go ask questions and I'll answer them on the way. That's one of the reasons I started doing that, but it's actually helped, get myself some content and stuff. And then, it's just, all the dumb fucking meetings you have to sit through and the stuff you have to listen to, kind of, I was like, we'll start, cause we'll start talking about the dumb shit I had to listen to. And that's basically where it came from. So anything you see on there, is not word for word, obviously, but it is pretty close. And I've kind of been running out of stuff lately, to be honest. But I'm every time I think that I don't have anything more, I'll start thinking back to, there was this meeting this one time, this guy said this, and so then a few more start coming out, but it's basically just, and it's another thing I thought about. I think it was, me and one of my friends were talking. He's a strength coach. He's like, I don't like going to conventions because all you hear about is strength coaches bitching about either their administrators, their athletes, or the sport coaches they work with. So it was kind of like that too. I was like, you know what? If there's one thing we can all kind of agree on, or one thing we all have in common, it's that we kind of go and deal with this stuff, So that's kind of where it came from. It was kind of a common thread, and maybe I get to talk a little shit too. I don't know.
What are some of the things that the trainers said, the athletic trainers? Like, what was some of the stupid shit that they would say?
Well, like if you have a kid with a lower body injury, and then they would say, no lower body for so-and-so. And it's like, no, there's so many other things we can do, Can we work around this? Ice and stim seems to cure cancer. And I can say this because the good athletic trainers that I know will agree with me. You know what I mean? Those were the big ones. Ice and stim, and I'm really surprised how many, and I get it because they see a lot of kids. Athletic trainers are just as busy, if not busier, than a lot of strength coaches.
Well, yeah.
So I get it, and they deal with, like, most of the kids coming through their door are complaining about stuff.
Well, they're the gateway between the kids and the doctor, and they got to determine if the kid's lying or not.
Exactly right. But it's surprising to me, the more strength coaches I talk to, how many athletic trainers don't do like soft tissue stuff. Because for the most part, I think they're licensed to do that. They can do it. And in my experience, like, I'm not a doctor or whatever, but that will take care of a lot of problems. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like of issues that seem really bad or really limiting. A lot of times you get in and do some deep tissue work or ART or scraping type stuff, hands-on type stuff. A few sessions of that will knock a lot of that out of there. You know, I've been 2 weeks out from a meet. I couldn't even hardly sit on a toilet. Like, I cranked my back up, I got adjusted, and I went to the meet, and you know, little ART things were good. I'm surprised. I'm surprised that stuff isn't used a lot more, I guess I could say.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but yeah, the ice and stim thing with the trainers that's pretty common.
The administrators,
Things they would say.
yeah.
This could be a series too. There was a point, and I don't know if this was coming from the coaches.
Let me throw. I mean, because here's one thing I don't understand. Even if you're salary, right? Legally, you really can't work somebody 60 fucking hours a week. I mean, if they wanted to, they could, you know, hire a labor attorney and make them pay, you know, overtime.
Yeah.
You know, or paid time off for the extra hours. But yet they do. So what do they say to fucking excuse that? Or nobody calls them out on it.
Well, you touched on it earlier. There's 100,000 other guys that'll do it if you don't want to do it for less money. Like, I used to, you know, I'd get like family members, they kind of knew what I was making and stuff, and like, well, you need to ask for a raise and you should be more. I'm like, I do ask for a raise every year, but administrators don't know the difference between me and a kid coming out of grad school. You know what I mean? Sure, there's coach feedback and that type of stuff, but at the end of the day, they don't understand the value difference. So if this kid will come do my job for 20 grand less, okay. If you don't want to work 70 hours a week, that's fine. We'll find someone else who does. You know what I mean? There's a big disconnect there, and you could say that in any industry. You know what I mean? The people upstairs don't understand what's going on down on the floor level. You really could say that about anything, but
Then the coaches. Classic coaching ones.
Can we train more core? Right after, I'm telling you, 2 sentences before, I explained to them that we do 100 weighted ab movements every day we're in the weight room. Well, where's the core? Here's one I haven't used yet. You know how the muscle's like a rubber band, right? So the more I stretch that rubber band, eventually it's just going to break. So I don't want to do a lot of reps. Okay. But you'll put you guys through 4 hours of practice every day, but you're worried about the muscle snapping like a rubber band. You know, more core. They always want more core. There's always the box squat stuff. Like, why do you squat with your feet out that wide? Why do you use the bands and chains? Why don't you just put more bar on the weight? It's endless. You know what I mean? It's crazy. There was one coach. I told you about the day I went to my office and I was like, do I really want to do this? This is another one of those moments. This coach I had been training longer than this coach had been alive, but she wanted to dictate everything we did in the weight room. Right? So she literally put a program out on the desk, and but I went with it, right? Because I'm trying to keep the job. So I'm like,
Yeah.
I look at it, and we talked about some concerns just from athlete health and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, that's what they want to do. That's what we're going to do. And I walked out of the meeting and I'm like, I've been training longer than she's been alive.
That's fucked up. Yeah, that's fucked up.
So,
I've read shit. I'm not gonna lie. I've read shit that people will write, or I'll see statements that people will make, and definitive statements, because that's the online thing to do if you want to stand out.
Yes,
You have to make a definitive statement, like box squats are the only way to squat.
Yeah.
All right, that's the way you stand out online. You can't tell the fucking truth and say box squat or a way to squat. You can't do that because you're not going to stand out, right?
Right. You got to get the clicks.
Yeah, so I'll see that definitive statement bullshit, and I'm like, okay, how old is this fucker? And then I look and I'm like, I walked into Westside the first day, and this is after fucking competing for 10 years, and this fucker was still in a playpen. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's like, I'm in there, doing the Westside versus the world shit, right? And this guy was playing with a rattle and chewing on a rubber fucking, gummy thing.
Right.
All right. But knows exactly what you're supposed to do. Where, to take it even older than me, you talk to Buddy, fuck, he's the biggest idiot. He'll tell you straight up, I don't know a goddamn thing.
Yeah.
Because the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know a fucking thing.
Yeah.
Since you've been out of the realm of coaching on a day-to-day basis, you've been in the realm of, consulting and helping other high schools with their program. What have you found to be some of the things that were either lacking or that have helped the most with those schools when implemented? So in other words, I'm a high school coach, but I can't afford to have you come down, right? What are some of the things that I should be doing with my program that you've found to be optimal with all the programs that you've helped?
I think, obviously, like a lot of people that come to me are looking to put conjugate type stuff in.
Yes.
And I think what's helped is like the specialty exercises. I think taking, because I think a mistake high school coaches will make with programming is thinking that they have to have that every exercise in that lift has to be a big compound movement because that's how we play sports. I think taking some smaller things and kind of taking the thought out of the process for the athletes, like just go do a bunch of banded hamstring curls and your hamstrings are going to get stronger, and in the end that's going to help you. I think that's been a help. Just smaller, easier to do movements, because a lot of the reason we can't do the big movements correctly is because we're not strong. So if you, like Louis talks about, you bring up the smaller parts, it's going to help the squat, it's going to help the deadlift, it's going to help the bench. This might go against popular opinion, but I think speed work has been a big help, because I think and this is kind of feedback I've gotten, it gives the kids a chance to get under a lighter load and kind of think their way through the lift. So yeah, they might not be strong enough to get the full neurological adaptation from speed work that we typically think of, but it does give them a chance to get under a lighter load and practice the lift for, and kind of learn it. And it helps them to learn how to accelerate, I think that's been a big help. That's kind of been some feedback that I've gotten from different schools. Like we talked about earlier, the doing the movements right. I think those two things kind of help you do the big movements correctly without loading up 80, 90, 70, % on the kid, and kind of help them get through. And then it'll help them transition to where you could actually start doing the heavy stuff. I would say those from a programming standpoint, you know what I mean? I think those have been pretty big.
Well, if you look at the dynamic work from the negative side and you take that stance on it, you're still teaching the kids compensatory acceleration. So you're teaching them to move a weight with force, which most beginners don't understand that concept, because it's in some ways weight training is the opposite of what happens on the field, because on the field you need to play loose, right?
Yeah,
in the gym you got to play tight, right? But in both scenarios you got to have compensatory acceleration at certain points, right? Coming off the ball for alignment, they have to be able to do that. Now, are they or are they not? You're not in their body to know that.
Yeah, right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So they may look like they are because they genetically possess that trait, all right? But they may not, all right? Then if they learn that trait, however it is, if it's dynamic work, if it's, med ball throws, plyo work, whatever it's going to be able to develop that trait. Hitting a blocking sled hard, right? These are all forms of, teaching that coming off compensatory acceleration type stuff. It's going to help, because I don't think a lot of the younger kids have developed that yet, unless it's a genetic trait. And it is a genetic trait. There's most definitely is it a genetic trait. And it can still be developed, into the teenage years. We can debate if it can be developed, in your older years. And even with that debate, let's say it can't be developed, it can be maintained, because one thing that we do know happens as you get older is you get slower. Yeah. So you see what I'm saying? So it's, in my opinion, you lose regardless. Now there might be, like a 10-year period where you could sit there and maybe get me to agree that it might not be necessary, but I doubt it, because I'm biased.
And to me, it's different. It's funny, if we think about it. Coaches want to throw in plyometric and agility and all this stuff that the kids have been doing that since they could run and jump. You know what I mean? If you're doing a box squat correctly, dynamically, it's completely different contraction type. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? They're not good at, like you said, it's a skill. They have to go from a dead stop or relaxed or isometric, whatever those three it might be. Mm-hmm. They're not good at it. They're good at the plyometric stuff already. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So if you bring up that box squat, it's going to help them on the field, because so much of sport is that type of contraction that we see on the box squat.
Yeah, it's starting from a dead stop.
Yeah, they're not good at it.
Yeah. No, that's the start of the play. I mean, there's various, there's in football, there's deceleration. There's a lot of other things that play a role.
Yes.
From just an eccentric standpoint, they have to eccentrically be strong enough to decelerate and not have their fucking hips shoot through their body like Bo Jackson. You know what I'm saying? That's how strong that fucking guy was. He stops and the hip just keeps fucking going. Anyhow, is that all we had?
Yeah, anything else you guys want to add to that?
Not really. Not unless somebody on the live feed has something that we didn't say or wants us to say. If not, we're done.
Okay.
Scoreboard. Close on that.